My name is Gray. This happened 6 years ago when my girlfriend and I were both 19. One evening, she texted me asking for a big favor. Her parents were out for the night, and she was buried under a mountain of homework. She asked if I could take her 10-year-old brother, Dean, to the local baseball field for his night game and bring him home afterward. Dean and I got along great, so I said yes right away. I picked him up a little early so we could make it before the game started at 7. The baseball field was in a very isolated spot. You had to park your car in an open dirt lot and then walk for about 5 minutes down a trail through a thick forest to reach the field. During the day, the path was fine, but at night, it was a completely different story. The game lasted much longer than expected because it went into extra innings. By the time it ended, the sky was pitch black. Most families had already headed home, and only a few people were left. Dean had to stay behind for a few minutes to talk to his coach about next week's practice schedule, so we were the very last ones to leave the field. Suddenly, the stadium lights shut off on an automatic timer. Everything around us was swallowed by thick, heavy darkness. We started walking onto the forest trail. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. Dean walked right next to me, but he was unusually quiet. He was usually a very talkative kid, but right now, he didn't say a single word. About halfway down the path, Dean suddenly stopped. He squeezed my arm hard and pointed ahead. "Gray, do you see that?" he whispered. I squinted my eyes to see. Even though it was dark, I could make out a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still in the middle of the trail. The person stood there like a wooden statue. Then, with a sudden and eerily smooth movement, the shadow slipped into the bushes on the left side. My heart skipped a beat. To keep Dean from panicking, I pretended I didn't see anything. "It's nothing. You're just seeing things. Let's keep moving," I said. We kept walking, but I swear I heard the sound of leaves rustling right beside us. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of someone moving through the brush, keeping pace with us. I gripped Dean's hand and told him to walk faster. Finally, we made it out to the parking lot. But when I reached into my pocket, my heart dropped. I realized I had lost my keys. I searched every single pocket, but the keys were gone. I must have dropped them in the bleachers. I thought about going back to look for them, but the idea of leaving Dean alone in the middle of a dark parking lot terrified me. While I was hesitating, Dean grabbed my sleeve. He pointed a shaking finger toward the trail, his voice breaking. "Gray, look." I turned around. Under the faint glow of my phone light at the edge of the path, that man was standing there, staring right at us. He wasn't hiding anymore. He stood there, blocking the only path back to the baseball field. "It will be faster to walk home. It's only about 15 minutes. We'll stay on the streets with lights," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We started walking along the main road. I held Dean's hand tight. We walked very fast, but I tried not to run. I knew that in the dark, running might trigger a predator's instinct to chase. I glanced back. The man was still standing there, motionless. When I looked back a second time, he had started moving. He was following us, keeping a steady distance behind. Under the bright orange glow of the streetlights, I could see him clearly. He was very tall, very thin, and he was fiddling with something metal in his hand. The light reflected off a long, sharp knife blade. I squeezed Dean's hand tighter, my heart racing. Suddenly, the man started making strange noises. It wasn't a scream. It was a series of choked, trembling moans like an injured animal. The sound grew louder and more frantic. "Gray," Dean whispered, his voice shaking violently. "Keep walking fast, but don't run," I said. I was panicking inside, but I had to stay calm for him. We sped up, and so did he. The distance between us didn't change. His moaning became louder and more crazed. As we turned onto the final stretch of road toward my girlfriend's house, we heard heavy footsteps behind us. He was charging at us at full speed. "Run!" I yelled. We ran for our lives. The footsteps were getting closer. The moaning had turned into a wild growl. I didn't dare look back for even a second. My girlfriend's house was right in front of us. We jumped onto the sidewalk and dove into the bushes next to the front door. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. I texted her, "Open the door now, emergency." The footsteps stopped at the end of the driveway. I hid behind the bushes, hugging Dean close and putting my hand over his mouth to keep him quiet. Through the leaves, I saw the man standing in the middle of the street. He was turning his head back and forth, searching for us. The streetlight showed his face. He was pale, his eyes were wide and bulging, and his mouth was hanging open as he continued to moan. The front door swung open and light poured out. Dean and I bolted from the bushes and scrambled up the porch steps. I slammed the door shut and turned all 3 locks. My girlfriend stood there, looking completely confused until she saw the sheer terror on our faces. "Call the police," I gasped, breathless from exhaustion. Looking out the window, the man was still in the middle of the street. He was pacing in circles, moaning and still clutching the knife. He even started frantically kicking over the neighbors' trash cans. The police arrived quickly, but the man had already disappeared into the shadows of the neighborhood. They searched the area but found no trace of him. They took our statements and promised to patrol the area more often. The next morning, I went back to the baseball field with a few friends. We found my keys wedged in a gap between the wooden boards of the bleachers. As I held the cold metal keys in my hand, a horrifying thought hit me. If I had actually had my keys last night and tried to unlock the car, he might have attacked me while I was distracted at the door. Or worse, he might have been waiting in the back seat. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. But whenever I remember the sound of him chasing us, my heart still pounds with that same paralyzing fear. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community. Let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
I am Nathan. When I was 10, I had the most memorable Halloween of my life. The morning of the 31st, I woke up with a high fever, almost 104 degrees. My mom put her hand on my forehead, shook her head, and told me I needed to rest. "But I want to go trick-or-treating," I promised my friends. I looked at my vampire costume hanging on the chair. "I'm so sorry, sweetie," Mom said. She tried to comfort me that there would be other Halloweens, but for a kid, waiting is never easy. I spent the whole day in bed, my body tired and aching. I felt helpless, listening to the sound of my friends shouting happily outside. As evening came, our doorbell kept ringing with trick or treat. Kids were coming to our house for candy. I figured my friends were gathering to go trick-or-treating too. I pulled the blankets over my head, feeling a sting in my nose, but tried to sleep so I wouldn't hear, wouldn't know anything else. I don't know what time it was, but I opened my eyes and the fever had broken. My body felt much lighter. But when I checked the clock, it was past 11 p.m. I sat up with a sigh and looked out the window. The streets were silent. Only the Halloween decorations' lights were dimly shining. Halloween was over. My heart felt heavy. I got out of bed and walked over to where my vampire costume was hanging. I had put so much effort into it. I figured I would wear it just to make it worth something. I put the cape over my shoulders, clipped the fangs into my mouth, and put on the hat. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to smile, but only felt sadder. As I stood in front of the mirror, something flew past the window. It was so fast I only managed to catch a black streak. I turned my head to look out. Nothing. I figured my eyes were just tired from the fever. But a few seconds later, the dark shape reappeared. This time, I saw it more clearly. It flashed by with a shrieking sound, like the painful breath of an animal. My heart started pounding fast. I stood still for a few seconds to watch more before slowly stepping toward the window. Outside was the familiar neighborhood scene. Nothing unusual. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to look out without daring to open the window all the way. I sighed in relief, ready to turn around, when suddenly something jumped onto the roof of a car parked nearby. I jumped, screaming while stumbling backward. It was a very tall creature. Its head was large, tilted to one side. In the darkness, I could only see pitch-black outlines with bumpy, lumpy details all over its body. It wasn't standing still, but writhing, its body contracting and then stretching out. Its mouth was wide open, emitting a sound like a moan mixed with a stifled scream. I wanted to run, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. My mind was blank, so terrified, but unable to take my eyes off the thing outside. It was a demon, a real demon. Then it turned its head and looked at me. Its two deep, black eye sockets were like bottomless pits. My mouth was dry. I couldn't utter a word. Then what I saw was even more terrifying. It smiled. That distorted face broke into a smile wide to its ears, its sharp teeth glinting in the dark. It was a smile of delight, as if it had just found a new toy. It seemed to be trying to get to me. Its movements were nothing like how a human moves. It started to crawl closer to my room window. Its head was still tilted, its eyes still fixed on me. I felt a warm stream run down my legs. I had peed my pants, but my entire body still couldn't move. The demon was getting closer and closer. Now I could clearly see every detail on its body. Wrinkled skin, jagged spikes growing out, blood dripping from its lips. It put a hand on the glass. 5 long fingers with curved claws. Next, its disgusting face pressed close against the pane, and it smiled again. The scream burst from my throat with all my strength. I screamed continuously, non-stop. A few seconds later, I heard feet running heavily down the hallway. My door flew open and my parents rushed in. "Nathan, what is it?" Mom hugged me, and I could only point a trembling finger toward the window. I stammered, unable to form words. Dad looked outside, his face pale. The demon was still there. Now, under the light of my room, it was clearer. It wasn't still, but jumping around excitedly. Its mouth was wide open, signaling something. Its hands were waving wildly, pointing toward our front door, and then pointing behind itself. Mom hugged me tighter, and Dad stared out. Silence lasted a few seconds. Then Dad frowned. "Wait a minute." Dad stepped closer to the window, leaning in to observe. The creature kept frantically waving its hands, but now I realized its actions looked more like it was pleading for help than threatening. Dad opened the window a small crack and asked, "Are you in trouble?" The creature nodded frantically, then pointed behind itself. Dad looked in that direction and burst out laughing. Mom and I just looked at each other, confused. Dad opened the window, and the creature immediately leapt inside. As soon as it was in, it fell to the floor, panting. Mom and I stood watching the scene before us, utterly bewildered. I heard a loud dog bark, and when I looked back toward the window, I saw a pit bull standing there and barking fiercely. My dad asked what was wrong, and the creature slowly sat up. It raised its hands and pulled off the rubber mask. Underneath the mask was a young man, face bright red, sweating buckets. He was gasping for air. "Thank you. Thank you so much." His voice was trembling. I stood there with the most surprised look on my face. His costume was truly incredible. That dog has been chasing me since the beginning of the street, he explained, wiping his sweat. I was in a costume contest at a nearby pub. On my way back, it just jumped out of nowhere. I ran for a long time, climbed onto a few cars, but it kept chasing me. I saw your light was on, so I tried to call for help. Sorry for disturbing your family. Mom released me, sighing in relief. Oh my God, thank goodness it was just a person. Dad poured the young man a glass of water. Did you make this costume yourself? It really looks terrifying. He nodded, forcing a smile. I worked on it for 3 months. I guess I went a little overboard. He looked over at me, still standing frozen. I'm sorry, kid. I didn't mean to scare you. I couldn't answer. Watching him sit there, the demon costume hanging loosely on him, I suddenly felt like laughing. The thing that had scared me so badly I peed my pants was just a guy running away from a pit bull. After the pit bull was taken away by its owner, the young man thanked my family and left. I changed my clothes and sat on my bed, looking at the demon mask he had given me. I was still shaking a little, but this time not from fear, but from excitement. The fever was gone, and I was holding the most unexpected Halloween gift, a terrifyingly realistic homemade mask. I had missed trick-or-treating with my friends, but instead, I had a Halloween night no one could have imagined. A night when a demon knocked on my window to escape a dog. I kept the mask safe and promised myself I would be healthy enough to never miss another Halloween night. But it wasn't until I was 16 that I finally grew into that mask. My name is Alvin. I work at a distribution center, about a 40-minute drive from my house. The job is backbreaking, and my shift usually ends at 2 a.m. If you've ever driven home at that hour in the middle of February, you know how lonely the roads can get. This happened 3 years ago during a brutal winter. It had been snowing since noon, and by the time I clocked out, the roads were a mess. My car was old and didn't handle well in the snow, so I had to drive slowly. The radio that night reported a semi-truck had flipped over, blocking both lanes of the highway I usually take. I was exhausted, my back was aching, and I just wanted to get home, so I decided to take a shortcut. This route cut through miles of farmland and thick woods. At 2 a.m. in the winter, there was nothing but a black void. I'd been driving for about 20 minutes. The heater was blasting at full power, but I was still shivering. The blowing snow made it hard to see anything beyond the reach of my headlights. That's when I saw something on the right shoulder, a lump sticking out of a snowbank. As I got closer, I realized the shape was a person. It looked like a man lying face down, half buried in the snow. My first thought was that he had likely been in an accident. I slowed down and looked around for a wrecked car, but the ditch was pretty deep, so it could have been hidden. I pulled over on the opposite side of the road and rolled down my window. "Hey!" I yelled, but the person didn't move. I shifted the car into park but kept the engine running. I went to call 911, but I had no signal. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and stepped out into the cold. "Hey, can you hear me?" I shouted again as I walked toward him. I was about 10 feet away when the man suddenly moved. He didn't groan or struggle to get up like an injured person would. He sat straight up, almost like he had popped up on a spring. When he turned to look at me, I noticed he was fairly young, maybe in his 20s. He wasn't wearing gloves, he wasn't shivering, and his face wasn't pale from the cold. Instead, it was flushed and full of life. "Help! My leg! I think it's broken!" he screamed. I stopped in my tracks because his voice was incredibly loud and steady, not shaking at all. More importantly, his eyes were locked onto my car behind me. Where's your car? Were you in a wreck? I asked, taking a step back. It's in the woods, he yelled, pointing vaguely into the darkness behind him without even looking. Come help me up. I can't walk. My suspicion was growing by the second. I took another step back toward my car. I'm going to drive up the road to find a signal and call an ambulance for you. The man's face changed instantly. He looked furious. Just get over here and help me, he barked. Then I saw it. Deep in the trees behind him, my headlights caught a reflection off of something metal. The next second, two dark figures charged out of the brush. The man in the snow scrambled to his feet and lunged at me. The two others sprinted toward the road to surround me. I spun around and bolted. My boots were slipping on the ice, and I almost fell face first. I dove into my car, and just as I grabbed the handle to slam the door, my hand smacked hard against the glass. The man from the snow was right there. He grabbed the door frame, trying to yank it back open. At that range, I could see he was grinning ear to ear. I used every bit of my strength to slam the door shut and immediately hit the lock button. The other two reached the car. One started yanking violently on the passenger door handle. The other was trying to smash the back window with something heavy, maybe a tire iron or a large rock. I floored the gas pedal. The guy on my side started punching the glass, screaming obscenities. The car lurched forward, and I nearly hit the man on the driver's side as he jumped back. I straightened the wheel and pushed the gas to the floor. I didn't stop until I reached a state police barracks. I ran inside like a madman, shaking and gasping for air. I told the officer everything. They immediately dispatched a patrol car to the location. They didn't catch them. By the time the police arrived, they were gone. But the officer told me later what they found. There were multiple sets of footprints in the snow, and behind the trees, right where those two men had been hiding, they found a pile of heavy rocks and a coil of rope. The officer told me straight up that they weren't just trying to carjack me. If they just wanted the car, they would have pulled me out and driven off. The rope suggested they wanted to take me with them, or tie me up and leave me in the woods to freeze to death. Since that night, I never take shortcuts. If I ever see someone lying in the snow again, I'll call 911, but I'm keeping the car moving. It might sound cold, but the look on that man's face that night killed my sense of charity.
Someone wrote a message on the bathroom mirror while I was living alone. I'm Carrie, 31 years old. I'm really independent. When I turned 18, I moved out to start living on my own and be independent. At first, I stayed in a rundown mobile home that my cousin lent me. I worked 2 jobs at the same time. I was a waitress during the day and a bartender at night. I went a different route compared to my friends who were the same age. Everyone else went to college and then looked for a job. But I decided to earn money first, find a comfortable place to live, and then either go to college or stick with the job I was doing. After 4 years of working hard, I saved up some money. I rented a small house to gradually improve my quality of life. The house I rented belongs to Mr. Robbie, who's 56 years old. The house is pretty close to the center. There were quite a few things that needed fixing in the house, but I was able to tackle them while I was moving in. I also spent quite a bit on furniture. The biggest expense was the wardrobe for the bedroom. I was hoping Uncle Robbie would have one and leave it for me, but I was a bit disappointed. My budget was almost gone, but I had my own house. I was still working 2 jobs and was constantly busy, coming and going late. Even though I had a nice house, I was only home for about 5 to 6 hours a day. One night, I came home at 11 p.m. feeling awful. I usually came home around that time. But that day, on top of my usual fatigue, my feet were sore from standing for hours. All I wanted to do was soak in the tub. When I entered the bathroom, I paused for a few seconds as the hot steam surrounded me, and I noticed some wet spots on the floor. I guessed that someone from the construction team had used the toilet, but why didn't they use the one in the living room? I thought to myself as I walked over to the bathtub and turned on the water. When I went back to the bedroom to get my pajamas, I stopped in front of a large mirror. Let's talk a bit about the bathroom design in my room. It would have been fine if there wasn't a huge mirror in there. It was 1.5 times taller than me and wider than my arm's length. I wondered why Uncle Robbie needed such a huge mirror in the bathroom. I also thought about redesigning the mirror in the bathroom, but couldn't get to it yet, since I needed to prioritize other areas. Back to that evening. What made me space out for a few minutes was the message written in steam on the mirror. I can see you. I figured it was someone from the construction team who wrote it. He seemed like the funny type. I wiped the words away and quickly got back to relaxing. About a week later, all the repairs and construction in the house were finished. Seeing the final results, I felt proud and a bit emotional. I finally had a comfortable bedroom to come home to after long, tiring work hours. A safe and secure parking spot. These things motivated me to work even harder. One morning, I walked into the bathroom still half asleep. With my eyes half closed, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my teeth. When I washed my face, I suddenly got startled. Have a nice day. Are you ignoring me? My nerves instantly went on high alert. I looked around the bathroom and bedroom, then ran down to check the kitchen and living room. I checked all the doors in the house. The main door and the back door had been completely replaced, and the windows had new locks. They were all still locked and showed no signs of tampering. I was sure I'd kept them locked since I wasn't home very often. With a baseball bat in hand, I checked every nook and cranny of the house to see if someone might be hiding. In fact, there was nowhere to hide in the small house, and I couldn't find anyone or anything suspicious. I pulled out my phone and called Uncle Robbie to ask if there were any other entrances to the house. Do you mean rats? No, I mean a human passageway. Uncle Robbie assured me firmly that there were no other entrances. Maybe the construction workers left it there just to mess with you. I thought the same thing after seeing that the furniture was still intact and tidy. There was no sign of any disturbance or intrusion in the house. I put it aside, and everything went on as usual for the next week, until that fateful night, when I woke up to go to the bathroom. Another line appeared on the mirror, and this time, it wasn't just a message. I will haunt you. I reacted strongly and called Uncle Robbie again, even though it was already midnight. It wasn't until the third call that he finally answered. Without letting him speak, I bombarded him with questions about the mirror in the bathroom. Do you remember me telling you about the special arrangement of things in the bedroom? Uncle Robbie's words surprised me. Had I missed something? There's going to be a large wardrobe in the bathroom instead of the bedroom. But I don't see a wardrobe, just a huge mirror. I told Uncle Robbie and pushed the mirror. It suddenly moved, like a door opening, and behind it was indeed a large, dark wardrobe. When the glass opened wide, I was startled to see a man's face. His hair was messy, his eyes were wide open, and his mouth was grinning widely. The darkness of the wardrobe seemed to swallow his body, making it look like a floating head was smiling at me. I screamed as loud as I could, and on the phone, I could hear Uncle Robbie's anxious voice calling my name. I rushed out of the house, hid in the car, locked the doors, and called the police. The police found the strange man still hiding in there. In the wardrobe were a few personal belongings, some canned food, and household items that I thought I had lost. The man didn't explain or answer any questions from the police. He was sometimes sullen and fierce, and other times cheerful and smiling. After that traumatic event, I continued to live in the house for about a year. I'm now living in a more complete apartment, studying for a university degree, and managing a restaurant. I always feel lucky that the intruder was just a man who wasn't in his right mind, and not some cold-blooded murderer. My roommate intends to kill me. I am Baron, living in a small house with 2 bedrooms. I posted an ad looking for someone to share the rent with. Even though I don't want to live with someone else, especially not a stranger. After a week of posting ads for a roommate on various websites, I met Dante, who was the same age as me. Dante moved in with nothing but a single backpack. He was tall, very thin, with an expressionless face and eyes that always carried a constant look of exhaustion. After taking a tour around the house, we discussed some essential details about living together. Everything I brought up, Dante agreed to without a second thought. He had only one issue he wanted to discuss with me up front. I often sleepwalk. I wonder if that will bother you. I used to sleepwalk myself and had to undergo treatment for a while. Moreover, we have separate bedrooms, so I comfortably replied, "That's not a big issue for me." Having an additional person living with me wasn't as inconvenient as I had imagined. We didn't have the same schedules, so we didn't run into each other very often. The house also felt less empty. One night, I jolted awake when I heard Dante screaming loudly. I hurried to his room to check on the situation. "Are you okay?" I called out loudly while knocking on the door, trying to drown out Dante's screams. But immediately, he stopped screaming, and everything fell silent again. I tried turning the doorknob. He hadn't locked the door. Looking into the room, he was still asleep, as if nothing had happened. He must have been sleepwalking, I thought, and went back to bed. A few months later, everything went back to normal. I noticed that he didn't have any family or friends. In the several months he's been living here, I haven't seen anyone visit him. He also didn't have any phone calls with anyone. That's what I observed. He also didn't go out for leisure. He only went to the supermarket to buy some essentials and then returned home. One night, Dante screamed loudly again. This time, I ran over, opened his door without calling out first, but as soon as I opened the door, everything felt eerily silent, and he was still sound asleep. In the following days, everything went back to normal. One night, I jolted awake in the middle of the night. In the corner of the room, a tall, thin figure stood staring at me with lifeless eyes. I sat up, screamed loudly, and quickly turned on the light. "Dante!" I exclaimed in an irritated tone. "What are you doing in my room?" He didn't answer, standing still like a statue. I walked over and gave him a firm pat on the shoulder. Dante woke up, and after realizing what was happening, he repeatedly apologized and went back to his room. I couldn't go back to sleep. The image of Dante in the darkness kept playing tricks on my mind. Wait a minute, I clearly locked my door. Realizing this anomaly, I raised a big question about him and started to be more cautious. In the following nights, I couldn't sleep well. I had trouble falling asleep, kept waking up suddenly, and felt as though I was being watched. One night, I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. Not long after, I jolted awake when I heard a noise that sounded like a door closing. I sat up, turned on the light, and looked around the room, but didn't see anything unusual. I walked over to the door, placing my hand on it with suspicion, and my heart was pounding. I turned the doorknob and was shocked to find that the door wasn't locked. But I swear I checked the lock at least 3 times before going to bed. Looking at Dante's room across the hall, a sense of tension and exhaustion overwhelmed me. I felt regretful for having found a roommate. I needed to have a clear conversation with him to find a solution. The next day, I left the house feeling extremely exhausted. The mountain of work that needed to be done left me drained. Returning home at 6 p.m., I collapsed into bed and fell asleep immediately. The screams rang out again, but it was very close, very loud, with a tone of pain and anger. I thought if I kept being pushed into such a state of panic and fear, my heart would eventually explode. I fumbled around, unable to find the light switch. Panicking and extremely scared, I also screamed loudly, joining in with the screams. Finally, the light was turned on. It was Dante, standing right behind my bed, hands holding the knife. His face was fierce with his eyes rolling wild, his mouth agape, all came down upon a scream. I stood on the bed, huddled into the corner of the room, my heart racing as if it might stop. He suddenly collapsed, kneeling on the floor with his head bowed, still holding tightly onto a knife. Minutes passed, and I didn't see any further reaction from him. I grabbed my phone, hurriedly fled the room, went to the garage and drove away. After driving a good distance away from the house, I checked the clock and saw it was after 3 a.m. I decided to sleep in the car and parked in the local church's parking lot. At 8 a.m., I drove back home. I guessed that Dante would be awake and that I would need to talk to him. But Dante was gone. He had moved out during the night. I called him, but couldn't get in touch. 2 months later, my lease ended. While cleaning up the house, I discovered a box in Dante's room. Inside there were many photographs of me sleeping, each one clearly dated. A key. I used it and opened my bedroom door. Sleepwalking might be causing Dante to behave in this disturbing way. Because he woke up in time that night, Dante stopped before he could harm me. Feeling guilty and embarrassed, he left. It's also possible that sleepwalking is just an excuse for him to carry out some evil intentions. Afraid that I would call the police, Dante quickly escaped and left behind this box. Regardless of the situation, I thank God that I am still safe. I have moved to another state, but what happened with Dante still haunts me every night. The secret behind Dante's actions remains a frightening mystery that I do not want to explore further. The notes and diary I found in the forest led to one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. I'm Benny, 35 years old. I love traveling to different places, discovering new things, and documenting it all. I have a YouTube channel where I share my real experiences with people who have the same interests. Over time, my hobby turned into a passion, and it even started helping me make some extra money. Last fall, I took a trip to explore a forest that's about a 4-hour drive from where I live. I planned to stay in the forest for a night or two and brought all the gear I needed. By the time I got to the forest, it was already late afternoon. There was still a bit of weak sunlight, just enough for me to look around and find a spot to settle for the night. The forest wasn't super wild or dense. From what I could tell, a lot of people had been there to explore before. I saw names carved into the trees, along with some water bottles, plastic bags, and leftover fast food boxes. As I ventured further into the forest, I spotted a few interesting things under a white oak tree. There were scraps of paper wedged with small stones at both ends, and they had personal notes written on them. The water bottles and flat stones were covered with song lyrics, and there were a ton of them. I felt curious and a bit intrigued, so I skimmed through everything that was written. The handwriting was kind of scribbled. There were a few cigarette butts left behind, so I figured this must have been a guy. The scene was pretty fresh. The pieces of paper were still white, and the handwriting hadn't been damaged by rain or dew. He must have left not too long ago. While looking around, I found another bag under the tree next to me. Inside was a thick red liquid, mixed with some chunks that I couldn't tell if they were meat or something else. A smell of decay hit me, and I thought it was coming from the stuff in the bag, until I saw a duck head with a long neck decomposing right next to it. An electronic device was in pretty bad shape. I figured it had been smashed with a lot of force. At first, I thought it was a smartwatch, but when I tried it on, it was way too big for my wrist. For a moment, I thought of a device used to track the behavior of prisoners after they're released. It's worn on the ankle. I tried it on and it fit my ankle perfectly. I found another notebook a few steps away, picked it up, and saw that it was in perfect condition. It was getting dark really fast, and the rustling sound of dry leaves startled me. I quickly left before I ran into any other dangerous animals. I found the perfect spot to spend the night, a small wooden house. After checking, I didn't find any belongings or items left behind by the previous person. I took out my stuff and started getting dinner ready with confidence. After I finished eating, I pulled out the notebook I'd picked up earlier to read. A notebook looked pretty ordinary on the outside and didn't have the owner's name on it. As I flipped through the first pages, there were scribbles and a few random sentences about life. Mike Jones, prisoner at San Quentin State Prison, released on May 30th. Reading that, I immediately felt a shiver. I knew this Mike. He was reported by the media and police in California to have died over a month ago, right after getting a 15-year prison sentence. He was a pervert with 13 charges, including violence, theft, and attempted murder, but he didn't succeed. Mike talked about what happened during his sentence, how he was beaten by other inmates, and how many times he tried to end his life, but failed. My nerves were on edge when I realized the handwriting in this notebook was similar to the handwriting on the pieces of paper and plastic bottles from earlier that day. So, I had accidentally wandered into the territory of a dangerous person. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and I was startled. My heart was pounding like crazy. I didn't answer or open the door. I just sat quietly, listening and waiting to see what would happen. After about 10 minutes, I slowly opened the door and looked outside, but no one was there. On the ground was a plastic bottle with a note that said, "Get out of here now. I saw you." I had just received a threat and a warning. It wasn't clear if that person was Mike Jones or not, but who knows what they might do next. On top of that, I don't have any weapons to defend myself. I quickly packed up my stuff and left the forest that night. I hoped I wouldn't run into any more trouble. Luckily, I got out of the forest safely and found a motel to stay in. Right after that, I called the police to report everything I'd found and sent them the video I had recorded. The next morning, I drove back home. That afternoon, I saw on the news that Mike Jones had been found and arrested by the police. He was sent back to prison because of his defiant behavior. Since then, I haven't had the guts to explore the forest again. It's a place with a lot of cool things to experience, but there are also potential dangers that can be hard to handle. The story is based on a true event about a YouTuber's scary camping trip. He really loves nature and has a passion for exploring new places. He recorded his trips and experiences and shared them on YouTube for people who have the same passion. After that scary evening, the young man gained a new perspective I learned to be more careful and alert on future trips. An incident happened that made me swear off running at night for good. I'm really into exercising and playing sports, but since I spend most of my day working, running at night seems like the best option. In an evening, after wrapping up a ton of work, I grabbed a quick snack, changed into my running gear, and headed down to the park below my apartment to blow off some steam. The park was empty at the time, but suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I instinctively turned my head and was startled to see a tall, dark figure running behind me. I started running faster, and my heart was racing out of control. But I could feel the person behind me getting closer and closer. My mind started racing with all sorts of worst-case scenarios. The more I ran, the faster I went, all flustered and panicked, with my heart pounding so hard it was tough to breathe. Not daring to turn around, I glanced to the side and saw the person's dark shadow falling onto the road right next to me. There was a couple being intimate up ahead, so I didn't hesitate to run over and shout for help. The girl in the beautiful white dress got up and walked over to me with a surprised look on her face. I gasped, turned around, and saw someone in a tracksuit running past. "Are you okay?" the girl in the white dress asked, looking worried. Now that I looked closer, she was really beautiful. She must have been on a date with her boyfriend. I gave a shy smile and thanked her. I curiously looked toward the boyfriend, but his face was hidden in the darkness, so I couldn't see him clearly. I thanked the girl again and left. Deciding to wrap up my jog, I was shocked to realize that my phone was missing. I froze for a few seconds trying to remember, and then realized I must have dropped it while trying to escape from my pursuer. I immediately ran back the way I came to find my phone. After searching around but still not finding it, I suddenly remembered the smartwatch I was wearing. Following the signal from the watch, I headed to the children's playground. But I had never run to this area before. Moreover, it was darker than the other areas. The playground equipment looked eerie and distorted in the darkness, creating strange shapes. The wind whistling through the dry branches, the chirping of insects, and even the weird sound of footsteps echoing in the dark. All of this turned what was usually a fun and lovely area into a place of horror and fear. I checked the signal on the watch again, and it definitely showed it was here. As I got closer to the playground, I heard music playing and was relieved to have found my phone. After wandering around the slide and seesaw for a while, all I could hear was the music from the phone. I turned around to look at the two swings a few meters away. I screamed in surprise, my heart racing and my head spinning. Someone was sitting on the swing on the left. "Who is it?" I said, my voice trembling like I was about to cry. That person didn't answer. The swing kept moving back and forth, the chains creaking, and the sound of water droplets slowly dripping made my legs feel weak. It looked like a girl in a long dress, but her back was turned, so I couldn't see her face clearly. My phone rang, and it was coming from that girl. She must have picked it up. "I dropped my phone with the pink case. Have you seen it around here?" The silence was still there, and it was haunting and unsettling beyond description. I slowly approached the girl. The phone rang even louder. Suddenly, the phone fell to the ground with a loud clatter, breaking the eerie silence. My whole body jumped. I quickly ran over and grabbed the phone right at the girl's feet. Holding the phone in my hand, I didn't have time to feel relieved. The phone was covered in a thick, fishy liquid. I was hit by that horrible smell for a few seconds. Looking down at where I'd just picked up the phone, I saw drops of water still flowing down, and the girl didn't react at all. I trembled, turned on the flashlight on my phone and shined it toward the girl. She had tears all over her face, neck, and chest, and her eyes were wide open in panic. Her red dress was soaked, and each drop of liquid slowly flowed from her feet to the ground. It was the girl who had been with her boyfriend earlier. I ran as fast as I could, putting all my strength into it. I knew I had to get out of there quickly because that murderer could still be nearby. When I got to the security room, I collapsed and quickly told them everything in 2 sentences. The security guard and I stayed in the room until the police arrived. I told the police everything that happened, especially about that tall man. He was the top suspect in the case, but unfortunately, I couldn't see his face clearly. But on the flip side, he knew my face very well. He also knew where I was and might be lurking around. I asked the police for round-the-clock protection. I installed more security cameras, alarms, and a more modern door lock system to make sure everything was safe. For 2 months, I lived in fear and confusion and hardly left the house. By the 3rd month, the police announced they'd caught the guy while he was hiding in a neighboring state. I moved in with my parents because I felt scared and panicked whenever I was alone. I avoided all dark, dimly lit areas, parks, and even playgrounds. I nearly got myself killed on my 19th birthday because I was being totally reckless. I am James, 30 years old. My scary experience went down 11 years ago. For my 19th birthday, I grabbed my 2 best buddies, Jim and Julian, and we decided to check out this old abandoned campsite in the woods. We decided to start exploring around 10 p.m. and figured we'd wrap it up before midnight to celebrate my birthday. With my immature mindset back then, I was super pumped, thinking this trip was going to be an awesome adventure and make me feel cooler than ever. The reason I knew about this campsite was because I went there when I was a kid. I came back there the week before and found out it was totally abandoned. That's why I wanted to check it out again. But I didn't expect it to be such a bad idea. After dinner, my 2 friends and I drove out to the campsite. Since we were all on the same page with our thoughts, opinions, and interests, we were totally pumped for the challenge we'd set up, laughing and chatting the whole way. About a mile from the campsite, we had to stop the car because a wood log was blocking the road. When we got out of the car to see what was up, we saw that the wooden beam had private area carved into it. I swear I didn't see this when I came here last week. I was quite surprised. Jim and Julian were really intrigued and even more curious. Just a few steps from the wooden beam, there was a triangular warning sign. We shined our flashlights on it and read, "Beware of dangerous dog." Jim suddenly burst out laughing and said, "What a joke!" Julian and I were a bit surprised at first, but then we got interested. We decided to leave the car and just walk into the campsite. Jim was walking around with his flashlight, and I had my phone out to record the whole cool adventure. We ventured deep into the forest, but before we got too far, we started hearing dogs barking in the dark. We stopped and exchanged glances. I whispered, "There really are dogs." Julian was pretty sure, saying, "I bet there's not just one, but at least 3. Our reckless curiosity made us more excited than scared, so we decided to push on further. We'd barely taken a few steps when a woman's loud scream freaked all 3 of us out. The scream was both angry and sad, and it was really haunting. "Turn off the lights," Jim whispered, and Julie and I instantly followed his lead. I could hear my heart pounding really hard. "What the heck is wrong with her?" I said. The scream stopped, so we waited a few more minutes, then turned the lights back on and kept going. The vibe got really tense, so we stopped talking and just stayed quiet. Out of nowhere, the woman's scream came back, this time way louder, like she had moved closer. We looked at each other, totally confused, turned off all the flashlights again, and just stood there listening. About 2 minutes later, we saw another flashlight shining from the other side. Not being able to make out who was in front of us, we just stood there in a daze, waiting for them to get closer. Jim turned on the flashlight, aimed it at the person, and said, "Hi." But what we saw froze all three of us in place. It was a woman in a white dress. No clue who she was. But what really freaked us out was the big axe she was holding tight and pointing right at us. We turned around and bolted as fast as we could, using every bit of alertness and speed we had left. As we ran, we screamed for our moms and for God. The woman was super fast. She chased after us and yelled, "I'll kill all of you, you assholes!" We ran in a panic and got separated in the dark. After running for a bit, I turned off the flashlight, hid in the bushes, and kept praying. Hearing Jim's scared screams and the dog barking, my heart just sank. With my hands shaking, I grabbed my phone to call the cops, but it felt like it was weighing a ton. After waiting 10 minutes, which felt like forever, I finally heard a police siren. I couldn't get up or move because I was too scared that danger was still out there. "Is anyone here?" a police officer called out loudly. I quickly turned on the flashlight to signal him, and they took me back to the car. When I saw Jim, my best friend, covered in cuts and bruises, I started crying. Julian was lucky to be okay, but he was totally crushed. The crazy woman kept screaming and fighting the cops, and it took 3 people to take her down. That night we were taken to the hospital. Jim had to be rushed to the ER because of blood loss, and Julian and I just got a general checkup. The next morning, once we were feeling a bit better, Julian and I were called into the police station to give our side of the story. After checking out the abandoned campsite, the cops found a bunch of stuff used for pagan rituals, 4 German mastiffs, and a lot of animal carcasses. The woman was arrested, and they started looking into it further. It took Jim 3 months to bounce back, both physically and mentally. We haven't done any more wild challenges since then, and we've realized that being reckless is like messing with your own safety and life. This story is based on a real event involving a Belgian YouTuber's experience. On December 29th, 2023, he and 2 friends drove into the forest to check out an old abandoned campsite. Their recklessness almost got them into serious trouble, and it ended up being a huge psychological shock.
Ryan and I have been close friends ever since I was 7. We used to be neighbors, and we were very mischievous. When Ryan and I were 16, our appearances were truly strange. I had piercings in any spot I could, wore bright neon colors, and had long hair that covered most of my face. Ryan, on the other hand, preferred a rather slick look, having all his hair and eyebrows shaved, and wearing tight-fitting clothes. At the age when many psychological changes occur, we became even more disliked in the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood. Not a single family was unaware of our bad reputation, nor any of them had ever escaped our bizarre pranks. However, we would only take things as far as playful teasing, with no intention of hurting others or engaging in criminal activities. Let's see what game we'll play today. According to the list, which house should we go to? I discussed with Ryan. The house at the end of the street just had new people move in, Ryan said. Is it that abandoned house? I asked, surprised. Let's go check it out. We were both really excited. The abandoned house at the end of the street was forgotten, but Ryan and I loved it. We even called it our secret base. It was true that someone had moved in because the front door had been replaced, and the surrounding area had been tidied up. Ryan and I approached and knocked on the door after curiously surveying the house. The door slowly opened, and a woman appeared. She had pale skin, sunken eyes, and a completely expressionless face. I guessed she must be in her 60s. "Hello, ma'am. We live in this neighborhood too. You just moved in, right?" I confidently greeted her. "What is it?" Her voice was so cold that I shivered, and there was a very unpleasant smell. I was stunned, staring at her face until Ryan nudged my arm gently. We have a small gift to welcome you," I said, presenting a small box. The woman stared at it for a moment before taking it, and the unpleasant smell returned as she said thank you. Ryan tugged at my shirt, and we quickly left. We peeked outside the gate to watch the woman's reaction to the gift we had given her. She opened the box, and a toad jumped out, but contrary to our expectations, she remained completely calm. "What? Is this the first time we failed?" Ryan exclaimed, surprised. "Did you smell that really awful odor earlier?" I asked Ryan, who looked at me puzzled. Ryan and I turned our gaze back to the woman. Both of us froze as we watched her stuff the creature into her mouth and chew ravenously. "Elton, did you see that?" Ryan's voice trembled. I didn't answer. We could both clearly see the frog's hind legs still swaying in rhythm with her chewing. I pulled Ryan away, both of us silent with our own thoughts. Eventually, we agreed to keep observing that woman. The next day, after school, we watched her again, but from a different angle. It seemed like she lived alone. After a while without seeing her, we were about to leave when we heard a noise. The woman had returned. It turned out she hadn't been home all this time. She was carrying a large sack, but she was surprisingly agile, which is unusual for someone as old as her. Whatever was inside the sack seemed to be moving. However, it didn't seem to interfere with the way she swiftly dazzled between places. "Neither of us would be able to move it, Elton," Ryan whispered. "I've told you before, she's all but normal," I muttered. But the surprises just didn't stop there. The woman went toward the backyard of the house, pulling out a healthy, living chicken from the bag. Ryan and I both understood that the bag was filled with chickens, and there must be dozens of them inside. The chicken struggled violently, flapping its wings wildly, its beak screaming in fear. The woman, without a moment's hesitation, gripped the chicken tightly with both hands, and suddenly bit down deeply into its neck. The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Hot red blood splashed out, flowing down her face and hands. The woman's mouth was full of blood, red patches of raw flesh between her teeth. She chewed voraciously, the wet crunching sound echoing in the still air. The chicken was still alive, writhing in pain, its eyes wide with panic as life slowly drained from its body. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. He seemed desperate to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I swallowed hard. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, my hands gripping Ryan's so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Cold sweat rolled down my forehead, each drop falling onto my face, merging with the thick, suffocating atmosphere of fear. We wanted to look away, but we couldn't. Our eyes were glued to the scene of the crazed woman, ravenously gnawing at the chunks of the chicken, while our bodies trembled, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of the horror overwhelming us. Ryan's backpack dropped to the ground, cutting through the eerie atmosphere like a knife. The woman turned towards us, her gaze like a jolt to the brain, snapping us back to reality. Ryan and I ran without pausing to grab our backpacks, our hands tightly clasped together. When we got to Ryan's house, his parents saw our frantic state and thought we had just gotten into trouble again. Both of us hurriedly recounted the incident, but all we got in return were annoyed expressions from Ryan's parents. We stormed back into Ryan's room. "Are you saying we should go back to that creepy woman's place?" Ryan exclaimed when he heard me mention wanting to figure things out. "Your backpack is still there," Ryan, helpless against my convincing reasoning. That evening, we arranged to conduct our investigation after dinner. Ryan's backpack was still there. There was a faint sound of crying, but loud enough for me and Ryan to hear. We exchanged glances, searching for the source of the sound. From inside the house, the woman emerged, still carrying a large sack over her shoulder. She set it down in the yard, slowly removing the outer layer to reveal a trembling little boy around 5 or 6 years old. Immediately, I grabbed Ryan, holding him tightly with one hand while covering his mouth with the other. With a sudden motion, she grabbed the child's wrist and yanked him toward herself. The baby screamed in fear, but the scream was quickly muffled as her bony hand tightened. Her fingers dug into the child's skin. She leaned close to the baby's face, smelling the scent of the soft skin, her eyes sparkling with madness. "Fresh meat," she muttered like an evil curse, her voice mixed with crazy laughter of someone who had completely lost their reason. Her hands clawed and her mouth opened wide as if preparing to tear the baby apart. Ryan and I shouted loudly, rushing to pull the baby out of that crazy woman's clutches. The brawl quickly got everyone's attention. They quickly arrived and called the police. The woman tried to run away but was stopped. She emitted a smell that made everyone hold their breath. The police showed up to control the woman. Inside her house, countless pieces of bones, meat, and other animals were found trapped and rotting. She was taken to a mental hospital after the police and doctors concluded that she had a mental illness due to living in isolation for a long time. No information or identification documents of hers were found. After only 2 weeks, she escaped from the hospital and disappeared. Although the police's conclusion was due to illness and circumstances, I thought that woman was like the reincarnation of Satan.
I once accepted help from a demon. I am Grace, and I have 2 little kids. One evening over 2 years ago, I was driving to visit my mom in a neighboring town with my kids. Due to work obligations, I set off quite late, around 9 p.m., and planned to stay overnight at my mom's house. At that time, my eldest daughter was almost 2 years old, and I was 7 months pregnant with my second son. As I drove on the relatively empty highway, I started to notice a car behind me. "It has been following me for quite a while, hasn't it?" I mumbled, then focused on driving. After driving a bit further, the car behind me began to honk and flash its headlights. I thought they wanted to pass, so I moved a little closer to the shoulder. But the car continued to stay behind me, constantly honking, which was really annoying. After about 10 minutes of this, my nerves frayed, and I pulled over to the side of the road. The car stopped right behind mine. With a mother's protective instinct, I checked the locks on all 4 doors, quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. A tall man was looking into my car and signaling for something. He was talking while pointing at the back of my car, and when he saw I wasn't reacting, he gestured for me to roll down the window to talk. I observed his demeanor, my mind racing with thoughts. Should I call the police? Does he need help? Seeing a sincere and trustworthy demeanor from the man, I rolled down the window just a bit, enough to hear what he was saying. "Do you need something?" I asked, sounding quite cautious. "Oh no, I just wanted to let you know that the left rear tire of your car is wobbling continuously. It's very dangerous." His demeanor and tone were very sincere, and I began to feel more at ease. I must have overthought this, I thought to myself. I got out of the car to check the rear tire, but I didn't see anything unusual. I also had no expertise in vehicles. But I felt everything was fine while driving. I looked at the man and asked. But I'm afraid it won't last much longer, he replied quite confidently. Let me call roadside assistance or the police. Thank you so much, I said while pulling out my phone to dial. There's no need to waste time like that. I can help you. The man quickly interrupted me. It's a simple issue. Just tighten the wheel. Seeing that I was still hesitant, the man continued. I worked in a garage for a few months. This is a simple task. You seem to be in a hurry, and you have young kids with you, right? My daughter woke up and unexpectedly called for me, and the situation completely convinced me. After about 15 minutes, the man announced that my car was fine. Thank you so much. What's your name? No problem at all. I wish you a peaceful evening. He smiled, waved goodbye, and walked away. I thanked him once more and continued on my journey. But just after I drove a short distance, I started to feel the wobbling of the tire. The more I drove, the more the car shook, leaving me extremely anxious, while my daughter clung tightly to me and began to cry. I stopped the car again, got out and checked. What bad luck, I muttered in frustration. A car coming from the opposite direction stopped. It was the man from earlier. Is something wrong again? He asked, concerned. Well, the condition of the car is more serious. I think I need to call... I must have messed up somewhere. I'm really sorry. Let me take you to the nearest gas station for help. Oh, no, thank you, but it's okay. I also have a part of the responsibility for your car. I decided to decline, but he didn't give me the chance. Once again, I was convinced. He politely opened the passenger door for my child and me. From that moment on, my 2 children and I officially faced the demon. After about 10 minutes of driving, we reached the nearest gas station, but he didn't stop. Instead, he accelerated and sped past it. He remained silent in response to my questions, his face cold and different from the friendly demeanor he had before. I began to feel a sense of fear. I quietly took out my phone, knowing I had to escape and call the police. Suddenly, a strong force yanked the phone from my hand, and I gasped and screamed. Shut up! I'm not sure I can stay calm. You and your 2 children will soon meet God. Wait until I'm done playing. Each word he emphasized made me feel like I was turning to stone. My breath quickened as I held my daughter tightly, feeling my son kicking forcefully in my belly. I had to find a way to protect myself and my children. After nearly an hour sitting next to the demon, a heavy silence enveloped us as he drove faster and faster, my heart racing to the point of almost breaking. I quietly scanned the sides of the road in the rearview mirror, my body nearly drenched in sweat. At that moment, I quickly opened the car door, curled up tightly around my daughter, and jumped out into the road. Thank God for protection. My daughter and I landed on the shoulder with soft, grassy ground. My daughter burst into tears, and I held her tightly, unable to get up just yet. I heard the car slow down and then speed off. I knew we were temporarily safe. I checked my daughter's body, breathing heavily as I broke down in tears from the panic. I carried my daughter and ran to the nearest police station, reporting everything I had just experienced. The police quickly contacted medical personnel to check the health of me and my daughter. Looking at the sketch of the wanted murderer posted on the wall, my body suddenly went numb. Zodiac. He was the one who wanted to kill me. Immediately, the police requested to block off the roads that the murderer might take. By the time we reached the spot where I left my car, it had been burned to ashes. He had erased all traces. I was affected by the jump and had a premature birth, but fortunately, I was still able to care for and witness my 2 children grow up. I was placed under police protection and moved to another state after giving birth to my son 6 months later. This story is based on a true event related to one of the cases of the Zodiac, one of the most infamous serial killers of all time. The victim was a woman named Kathleen Johns. She arrived at the police station in a state of extreme panic, pointing at the sketch of the Zodiac on the wall and exclaiming, "That's the man who just tried to kill me." Kathleen was an incredibly fortunate survivor. To this day, the true identity of the self-proclaimed Zodiac killer remains a mystery. It is impossible to know the exact number of victims who died at his hands.
I still clearly remember my heart pounding that night and the crazy look in his eyes when he saw me. Now I can finally tell this story calmly. I'm Iris, a third-year college student at a university in Georgia. I share a small house with my two best friends from freshman year, Nora and Quinn. We lived like three sisters, sharing everything with each other. It all started when Nora suddenly announced she was taking a leave of absence from school to go home for medical treatment. We were all surprised because Nora looked completely healthy. On the day she left, Nora cried a lot. We told Nora to keep in touch and promised to visit her when the semester was over. Since Nora left, the house had become much quieter. That weekend, Quinn went home to visit her family. I was even lonelier being by myself. I was in my room studying for an exam. Around 10 p.m., I heard a noise from the kitchen. At first, I didn't pay attention because I was focused on studying, but the noise repeated like someone was rummaging through a cabinet. My heart started to beat faster. I walked out of my room. It was dark outside, with only the light from my room shining out. Suddenly, the kitchen light turned on. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. After a few seconds of observation, I slowly moved toward the kitchen. As soon as I stepped out of the hallway, I saw a dark figure standing in front of the refrigerator. It was a tall man. His shoulders were broad, and he had a long scar on his left forearm. When he turned around, I was startled again to see his red face and scraggly beard. But there was something familiar about him when I looked a little closer. He came toward me aggressively. "Where's Nora?" Hearing Nora's name, I suddenly realized it was her boyfriend. But the person I had seen before was a brown-haired guy with a bright smile, completely different from the man in front of me. I tried to stay calm and said Nora had taken a leave of absence and wasn't here. He frowned, looking surprised. He didn't believe me and demanded that I tell him the truth. I repeated everything again, and I told him to leave immediately. He sneered and started pacing in the kitchen. He talked about how Nora had said she needed time to think and then completely disappeared, forcing him to look everywhere for her. As he said that, he suddenly shoved a chair and yelled, "Where is Nora?" His eyes were wide, and spit flew from his mouth as he screamed. He ran into the living room looking around for her. Then he ran to the bathroom door and opened it. Seeing no one, he ran to my bedroom door yelling, "Nora, I know you're in there!" I just stood there, my hands and feet numb as stone, my mind blank, unable to think. The scene in front of me was too crazy, and I lost all ability to react. The crazy guy didn't stop. He started smashing things when he couldn't find Nora. The sounds of breaking things echoed through the house like a nightmare. I couldn't stand there anymore. While he was distracted, I ran back to my room. I locked the door and, with trembling hands, called 911. I whispered to the dispatcher that there was a violent intruder, that I was alone, and that I was very scared. Before I could finish my sentence, a very loud banging on the door rang out. "Open the door! Nora's in there, isn't she?" I was startled and dropped my phone. The next second, I quickly grabbed my phone and begged the police to come as fast as they could. In that moment, I burst into tears, feeling desperate because I was facing a crazy person all by myself. After a few seconds of banging on the door, the sounds got louder and the door rattled violently. The crazy guy was using his shoulder to ram the door. He roared that he would find Nora no matter what. I huddled in the corner, covering my ears. After a few seconds, the door suddenly went silent. Then it turned to the next terrifying sound. He was repeatedly knocking on the lock. I panicked, realizing he was about to get in. My mind was blank, and I didn't know what to do except pray that the police would get there in time. The final clang rang out loudly, and the door flew open. He burst into the room, his red eyes scanning the place. "Where's Nora? Where are you hiding her?" He flipped the bed, pulled all the clothes out of the closet, and threw everything around the room. I huddled in the corner, not daring to move. "I'm asking you one more time, where's Nora?" he yelled in despair, continuing to smash things. My fear reached its peak. I was in a small room with a crazy person, and I felt like I was about to die from panic. I couldn't breathe and could only pray for it to end. Finally, police sirens blared loudly. He stopped smashing things. It took him a few seconds to process. Then he ran to the front door. The sounds of yelling and scuffling echoed in. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. "The intruder has been arrested. You can come out now," an officer announced. I shakily stepped out and saw the house was a war zone. He was taken away on charges of breaking and entering and making threats, and would be held for at least 48 hours. I couldn't sleep a single minute that night. The next day, I called Nora. When I told her what had happened, she was silent and then burst into tears. Nora apologized for putting me in danger. She never thought he would come all the way here. The truth was, Nora didn't actually take a leave of absence because of an illness. She left to get away from him. Nora told me about the terrifying months she had gone through. He had controlled her every move, manipulated her psychologically, and threatened violence every time Nora wanted to leave him. I thought leaving would end everything, but I never thought it would make him go crazy and act like that. I encouraged Nora a lot, telling her to come back to school because he had been arrested. He was sentenced to 1 year of probation and a 5-year restraining order against Nora. Nora agreed. Quinn also came back and was shocked to hear what had happened. We cleaned everything up together. In the following days, we replaced all the locks and installed a security camera system. 3 months later, sitting in the repaired house, I still jump every time I hear a strange noise. Nora is now back in school, stronger, and no longer having to face her dark past alone. We've grown closer after what happened, and realized that no matter how much darkness there is, as long as you have faith and support, you will always find the light to move forward. I never thought that installing security cameras would turn out to be the worst decision of my life. It all started when I moved into a small house on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon. My closest neighbor was almost half a mile away. It was just trees and an empty road all around. I felt I needed something to make me feel safer, so I decided to install cameras. I called the security company, and they scheduled a technician to come out that day. The installation went smoothly. The camera was mounted on the front door and connected to my phone. I felt more secure and adjusted to my new life pretty quickly. Except for the commute taking a bit of time, everything was fine. One day, I drove home after having too many drinks at my best friend's house, hoping to pass out on my own bed. I was shocked when I noticed the front door wasn't locked. There was no way I was that careless. Pushing the door open, the living room showed signs of a mess. It looked like someone had been rummaging through everything. As I went deeper into the house, I was horrified by the pitiful sight before me. I walked into the bedroom and my whole body went cold. The dresser drawers were open. My underwear was scattered across the bed. Someone had touched my things. I backed out of the room, trying to breathe steadily, and then I remembered the camera. I opened the app on my phone, but the screen showed a message that the memory card could not be found. I ran to the front door and looked up at the camera. The small slot for the memory card was empty. I panicked and quickly called my boyfriend, crying a lot. Jake told me to lock the door carefully and immediately drove over. We gathered the necessary things, and Jake took me to his place right away that night. After hearing my story, Jake was furious. Jake has a bit of a temper, but he's always calculating. He was a lifeguard for 7 years, and has been training in martial arts since he was a kid. Jake said he would call the police, but that wasn't enough. Since this guy knew I lived alone, he had entered my house, and he might come back. Jake looked at me and said he had a plan. He's going to pay. Let him come back, but this time, I'll be waiting for him. The plan sounded crazy, but I completely agreed to follow Jake. He would wear my clothes, put on a wig, stay in the house, and wait. I would be in the car, a few hundred yards away, ready to call the police if anything happened. That evening, around 10 p.m., a tall, skinny man was walking from the side of my house. He moved slowly and seemed familiar with every corner. He opened the back door and disappeared inside the house. Everything that happened next was recounted to me by Jake, and I still get chills whenever I think about it. Jake was lying on the bed after disguising himself, covered with a blanket up to his waist. The room only had a dim nightlight. He heard light footsteps from the hallway. Then the bedroom door cracked open. The steps came closer. The breath of a man was warm on the back of his neck. Then the guy hugged Jake from behind. His hand kept stroking sensitive areas and whispering my name. But then he stopped abruptly when he reached down there. Then he continued to touch Jake's shoulder and bicep as if to confirm. Jake turned around in a flash, delivering a punch straight to his face. A loud scream, and the guy staggered back. Jake didn't stop. The continuous strikes didn't give him a chance to fight back, but also ensured no serious damage. A little while later, I got a call from Jake and ran into the house. Jake was holding him tight, with his hands twisted behind his back, face down on the floor. I turned on the lights, and what stunned me was him, the camera technician. He mumbled my name, looked at me with swollen eyes, and uttered a sickening sentence. "Ariana, there you are." I couldn't wait to enjoy all of your body myself. My boyfriend yelled, landed a powerful punch, and ordered him to shut up. I backed away, shaking badly, my hand dialing the police, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. He had been here from the start. From the day he installed the camera, he knew everything about me. At the police station, he confessed everything. His name was Ryan Cole, and he had worked for the security company for 2 years. There had been 5 other victims before me, all women living alone who called for camera installation services. They hadn't reported him because he kept the sensitive videos. He praised the police, saying I was the most beautiful and hottest of all his victims, his voice disturbingly calm. I sat in the waiting room, Jake holding me tight. I couldn't cry, I just felt empty. 3 weeks later, I moved in with Jake in Portland. His apartment is on the 3rd floor, with a security guard and public cameras. The neighbors are also very friendly. For the first few nights after the incident, I couldn't sleep. I remembered the day he came to install the camera. He asked me in a friendly voice if I lived alone, and I answered everything without being cautious. I had been too careless, without a second thought. Now, whenever a stranger asks me anything, I just smile and ignore them. Always be absolutely careful with everything, especially when you are a woman living alone. Sometimes your innocence and honesty are the very opening for predators to access you. I hope we can all stay safe. I started hearing strange sounds. At first, it was just a faint rustling sound coming from the living room late at night, like someone was rummaging through something. I jumped up, flipped on the light, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor. There are no fire escapes near the windows, and the main door was securely locked. There was no way a stranger could break in. I told myself I was just overly stressed from binging 3 horror movies. Maybe my imagination was acting up. The next morning, I looked for my mug to make coffee but found it in the sink. I didn't remember when I had used it or why I hadn't washed it right away. Next, the notebook on my desk was opened. But I was currently on vacation. I hadn't done any work all week. These small things started adding up. I double-checked the door locks and window latches carefully before going to bed. The next morning, some items still showed signs of being moved. I even noticed that the kitchen area had been used. That evening, I decided to try a different approach. I deliberately arranged some things in a different order. After using the mug, I would put it in a drawer instead of on the dish rack. Items in the bathroom were also rearranged after the last time I went in that day. And sure enough, they had been moved by the next morning. At that point, I was certain someone had broken into the apartment. But I didn't have enough evidence to call the police. These small signs weren't enough proof. I hadn't lost any valuable items either. I needed to collect more evidence, so I bought 2 mini cameras. I set one up near the front door and aimed the other at the window. Those were the only 2 places someone could break in. That night, I kept the camera app open on my phone all night to monitor. Nothing unusual happened. I dozed off a few times and then woke up with a start. Repeating that all night left me completely exhausted. The next morning, everything was still messed up. I rushed to check the camera footage, but there was still nothing. A chill ran down my spine. Something was playing games with me, and it knew exactly how to avoid being seen. For 3 nights in a row, I didn't get a full night's sleep. Every time I managed to drift off, I would be startled awake by vague sounds. A very faint tap, a chair creaking, or the feeling that someone had just brushed past my bed. I sat bolt upright in the middle of the night many times. In the morning, my eyes were burning, my head was throbbing, and I could feel my heart pounding hard. By the 5th day, I started doubting myself. Was I doing these things in my sleep? Maybe I was too tired and my brain was starting to conjure up things that weren't real. I searched online for symptoms of sleep disorders. One article mentioned that sleepwalking often happens when a person is under prolonged stress. Then, the next night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They were very clear, slow, moving from the living room toward the hallway. My heart hammered like a drum, and sweat began to trickle down. I lay motionless, not daring to breathe loudly or turn on the light. Something was in my apartment, but I was too tired and scared to act. I burrowed deep under my covers, my hands trembling, trying to whisper the prayer my mother used to teach me. Then the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting. Nothing happened. And then, when I opened my eyes again, the sky outside the window was bright. I sat up and looked around the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but I was still terrified. I called out of work that day, sitting on my bed and staring at the bedroom door. Every sound made me jump. That night, I saw it. A dark shadow standing in the corner of the living room. It wasn't the shadow of furniture or an illusion from the streetlights. It stood tall and straight, and it was looking toward me. The shadow began to move, slow steps advancing toward me. My brain kept repeating that this was a nightmare. My throat felt constricted, and my limbs were numb. But every sound and image I was experiencing felt completely real. The shadow moved closer. Then it stepped out of the darkness, and I saw a man's face. He was wearing a uniform I had seen before. He stretched out his hand. When he touched my shoulder, it was like an electric shock that snapped me fully awake. I screamed, pushed him backward, and lunged into the kitchen. My hand grabbed a kitchen knife, and I spun around, swinging it toward him. He rushed forward, grabbed my hair, and yanked it back. I swung the knife repeatedly. Then he let out a roar and let go of me. I ran into the hallway, screaming at the top of my lungs for help. The person in the apartment across the hall let me hide and called the police. The police arrived. A while later, they dragged him out of my apartment, and my neighbor took me outside. The police said they had pulled him out of the closet in the living room. I was stunned when I looked at him. He was gaunt, his hair was messy, and his eyes were deeply sunken. I looked closely at the crumpled brown uniform, and I suddenly remembered he was one of the 2 delivery men. Earlier in the week, I had ordered a desk on Craigslist. He was the one who had asked to use the bathroom that day. I was busy dealing with some work, and by the time I came back out, both men had disappeared. So he had never actually left. I nearly collapsed thinking about the fact that I had been living with him for almost a week. A feeling of absolute dread washed over me. I had even thought I was losing my mind. I felt both terrified and angry at myself. I hadn't realized it sooner. Something I thought only happened in movies was actually happening to me, and I couldn't blame anyone but myself for being too careless. After the incident, I moved to a different apartment. I installed extra locks, bought an alarm, and never let a stranger step inside my home, not even for a few minutes. I learned one thing. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what we can't see, but what we have seen and failed to pay attention to. A few years ago, right after I turned 18, my family, including my parents, my 11-year-old brother Evan, and me, decided to have a different kind of Christmas holiday. We left the suburbs of Ontario to visit a forest area, renting a set of hunting cabins. We set off around 2 p.m. on Christmas Day. My mother wanted a rustic, nature-centric Christmas experience. We brought along our German Shepherd Ranger. He's a gentle but extremely protective dog, especially of Evan. We arrived at the cabin area around 4 p.m. It was a small cluster of cabins scattered throughout the woods. The weather was already freezing, and snow had begun to fall. We quickly moved our belongings into the cabin and started enjoying Christmas Eve by playing games together. My dad had prepared his hunting rifle in a bag, placing it under the bed where I would be sleeping. He usually keeps the gun locked in a case, but since we planned to go hunting the next morning, he left it there. Around 10 p.m., Evan and I were tired and decided to go to bed. Our room was at the end of the cabin facing a river. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to Ranger's low growling. Initially, I didn't find it strange because my dad often suffered from insomnia and would sit in the living room watching TV, and Ranger would usually growl at any minor noise. However, this time I noticed no light was cast from under my door. My dad never sat in the dark. I whispered to Ranger to be quiet so Evan could sleep, but the growling quickly turned into barking, waking Evan up. Just then, our bedroom door suddenly flew open and the light snapped on. My eyes were dazzled, and when I adjusted, I saw my dad standing in the doorway, eyes wide and face pale. He asked, "Were you two laughing?" I replied, "No." He walked over, pulled open our bedroom curtains, stared into the darkness outside for a moment, and then closed the curtains. He simply said, "It's nothing. Go back to sleep." He turned off the light and left. I found my dad's behavior eerie and couldn't fall back asleep. I started at almost every sound for the rest of the night. Around 4 a.m., just as I was dozing off, I heard a strange sound outside the window. It was the distinct crunch of footsteps, not the sounds of an animal. I felt an extreme fear and pulled the blanket over my head. Then, I heard a light tapping on the window, which lasted for a few seconds. Ranger was awake now too. He turned his face toward the window, ears pointed straight out, listening intently. The tapping returned, louder than before, making Ranger bare his teeth and growl. Then, the scariest thing happened. A low, hoarse voice whispered, "I know you're in there, little one," followed by a chilling invitation. "Why don't you come out and play with me?" Initially, I thought it was someone from a neighboring cabin playing a joke, maybe a group of teens also on holiday. I leaned forward and slightly parted the curtain to look out, ready to give them a piece of my mind for scaring us. But the person standing outside was far from normal. Under the dim light from the cabin's porch lamp, I saw an older man wearing a shaggy blue costume, exactly like the Grinch, the Christmas-stealing goblin from the movie. The lower half of his face was covered by a mask, but his eyes darted back and forth and his matted hair were enough to send a chill down my spine. His filthy hand was stroking the window pane as he whispered and gasped for breath. Anger replaced fear, and I immediately switched to protective mode. I grabbed my dad's hunting rifle from under the bed, pulled the curtains shut, and yelled, "Get lost, or I'll shoot!" The old man's eyes widened, and a horrible smile appeared on his face. Ranger started barking louder than ever. He was ready to attack at any moment. My parents heard the commotion and quickly rushed into the room, turning on the light. My mom screamed when she saw the old man through the window, while my dad yelled at him, telling him the police were on their way. In those few chaotic seconds, I noticed his blue furry costume was torn in places and covered in snow. He stood there for a few seconds, his eyes manic, then turned and bolted into the woods. Evan was terrified. He remained silent, a look of panic etched on his face throughout. In that moment, all I felt was anger and immense gratitude that I had the gun. The police caught the old man a few minutes later. A few days later, I learned that he was a homeless man living in the woods and suffering from mental health issues. The Grinch costume was found in his backpack, along with some old toys and a small knife. This terrified me when I thought about what could have happened to Evan if I hadn't been there. That night, we didn't dare to sleep in our cabin anymore and requested to move to an empty one nearby, closer to the management office. Only much later did my dad reveal the truth. He said he knew someone was lurking around our cabin, so he deliberately left the rifle under my bed in case I needed to defend myself, but he didn't want to scare us. My dad had called the police after hearing the man laugh and sing a creepy nursery rhyme, then growl a fake Grinch voice right outside his own bedroom window. That was the last Christmas my family spent in the woods. It took a very long time for Evan to sleep well on winter nights, and I still check the windows carefully before going to bed. And I will never forget the manic look in the eyes of the man in the Grinch costume that day. I'm writing this from room 314 at Lima State Hospital in Ohio. They say I'm delusional, but I know what I went through was real. My name is Ellie. I'm 26. 3 months ago, I was a waitress at a diner. I rented a small apartment on Oak Street near Riverside Park. Everything was quiet until he showed up. The first time I noticed him was when he came in as a customer at the diner. He was tall, thin, and around 30 years old. Always wore a white shirt and khakis. He would just sit there and watch me while I worked. I tried to ignore it, but he came back every single day, always at the same time and in the same booth. He would always stare at me with unblinking eyes. I started to feel uneasy. After 2 weeks, the messages started appearing. First, it was a small piece of paper tucked under my car's rearview mirror. The handwriting was neat. "The blue sweater looks good on you." I had worn a navy blue sweater that day. It could just be a coincidence. I threw the note away. The second message appeared, taped to my bedroom window. "Your pink socks are very cute." I looked down at the socks on my feet and shuddered. I called the police, but what I reported wasn't convincing enough. The police promised to patrol the area more often. I started becoming sensitive to every single noise. I installed extra locks and kept the curtains tightly drawn. Things gradually escalated. One evening I got home after a late shift and found my trash can had been knocked over in front of my door. Garbage was scattered all over the hallway. I just had to clean everything up in frustration. I didn't dare stay home alone anymore. I asked Tom, my friendly neighbor, for help. Tom was handsome and lived alone in the apartment across the hall. "Ellie, you should call the police," Tom said when I told him everything. I was grateful for Tom. He was the only person who believed me. The next day, when I opened my door, a dead sparrow was lying right on the doormat. Next to the bird's body was a piece of paper with the words, "You can't escape." I quickly backed into the apartment, shakily locked the door, and then sank to the floor. That evening, I woke up to a noise from the kitchen. It sounded like someone was opening the refrigerator. My heart started to pound. I grabbed my handgun and crept down the hallway. There was a shadow moving in the kitchen. "I have a gun!" I shouted, my voice trembling. The shadow stopped. Then it slowly turned around. It was him again. He stood in my kitchen, holding a bottle of water and smiling at me. "Hello, Ellie." I hated that face, furious at that gentle, casual, yet haunting attitude. I pointed the gun straight at him decisively. "Shut up!" Right after my shout came the deafening sound of the gunshot. He fell. Blood spread across the kitchen floor. I stood there gasping, staring at the motionless body for a few minutes. When I realized the situation, I trembled as I reached for the light switch. I screamed with all my strength at the sight before me. The person lying there was not him, it was Tom. Blood was pouring non-stop from his chest. Tom's eyes looked at me with surprise and pain. "Ellie, I heard a noise. Thought someone." Tom gasped. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking as I pressed down on the wound. "Tom, I'm sorry. I didn't know," I thought. Tom tried to say something, but blood filled his mouth. Then his eyes slowly glazed over. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. Tom died from massive blood loss. The police arrived. They found no signs of forced entry. I told them about the stalker, the messages, and everything I had endured recently. But when the police checked, their answer was still that they found no evidence. Stress can make people do things they don't realize. You might have written those letters yourself during a period of high anxiety without knowing it. The psychiatrist told me, "No, I'm not crazy. He was real. He was in my kitchen," I yelled. But no one believed me. The only person who believed me was the one I had killed. I was taken to Lima State Hospital. They gave me medicine, made me participate in therapy sessions. They said I would get better if I accepted the truth. Last night, I looked out the window of my room and saw him standing in the yard. The same white shirt, the same khakis. He looked up and smiled. I called the nurse, but when they looked outside, there was nothing there. "You're having delusions again, Ellie. Take your medicine and rest," the nurse said. "But I know he's still out there." I never thought that a pair of underwear could be the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I'm Alex. At the time, I was 17 years old, a normal kid who liked playing basketball and spending time with my girlfriend. Her name was Sarah. She was my age and lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in California. We had met at the beginning of our senior year of high school, and our relationship was only a few months old. That night, Sarah texted me and invited me over because her parents were away on a weekend trip. I was excited, and I drove my dad's car there without a second thought. I parked in front of Sarah's house and checked my phone for messages. I had texted Sarah that I was on my way, but she hadn't replied. Maybe she's getting ready inside, I thought. I straightened myself up a bit and walked toward the front door. The living room window was slightly ajar. I was about to knock on the door, but then I stopped when I saw a figure moving in the living room. It was a man, tall, wearing a dark jacket. Sarah had said it was just going to be the two of us. I didn't rush to knock on the door, and instead observed a little more. He was walking slowly, looking around as if he was searching for something. My heart beat a little faster. I squinted to get a better look through the glass. He was wearing a green hood, which covered most of his face. But then, when he turned around, the light shone on him more clearly, and I realized something terrifying. It wasn't a normal hood, but a pair of women's underwear he was wearing on his head like a mask, with two hastily cut eye holes. The bottom half of his face was still exposed. His mouth and chin were covered in stubble. Panic washed over me. I couldn't think anymore. My first instinct was to run. I turned and rushed toward my car, almost tripping on the stone walkway. Then I remembered my girlfriend. Where's Sarah? Is she okay? I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and reached for my phone to call 911. My voice was stammering as I told the operator, "Someone broke into my girlfriend's house. He's wearing underwear on his head. Please come quickly." The operator said they would have police officers there right away and told me not to do anything dangerous. But my concern for Sarah grew stronger. My girlfriend was so beautiful. I couldn't leave her alone with him. Even though my hands and feet were numb with fear, I decided to go back. I quietly approached the front door. Hidden behind a low bush to the left of the door, I took a deep breath and yelled as loud as I could, "The police are coming! You can't get away!" I immediately crouched down and hid in the bush. From inside the house, there was a loud noise, things breaking, and the sound of footsteps running. Then the front door burst open, and I was stunned to see not one, but two guys rush out. Both of them were wearing underwear on their heads as masks. One was wearing a green jacket, and the other was wearing a black one. They ran toward the backyard, but they tripped on the lawn and dropped a few things from their bags. I stayed hidden in the bush, not daring to breathe loudly. Then police sirens blared from a distance, and red and blue lights flashed on the street. 2 patrol cars stopped in front of the house, and 4 police officers jumped out, their guns ready. The 2 thieves who were trying to run through the backyard panicked even more when they heard the yelling, but the police quickly caught up to them, tackled them to the ground, and handcuffed them. It was crazy that the guy in the black jacket even mumbled a request to keep the underwear on his head. I came out and told the police everything. Then I went inside with an officer to look for Sarah. She was tied tightly to a chair in the upstairs bedroom, her mouth covered with duct tape. The closet had been ransacked, and clothes and underwear were scattered all over the floor. Luckily, Sarah was not hurt, but her eyes were filled with a soulless, panicked look. After a few days of investigation, the case was reported in the news and quickly spread because of the 2 robbers' bizarre behavior. The police said they were brothers and had committed several burglaries in the area. The underwear on their heads was how they covered their faces to avoid the cameras. A bizarre act that even the police found hard to understand. They were arrested and sentenced to prison, but for Sarah, the fear didn't just go away. In the days that followed, she started having nightmares, jumped at every small noise, and was afraid to be home alone. It's been almost 6 years since the incident. Sarah's mental health is better after going through therapy. We are now engaged and will be by each other's side for every moment of our lives together. This happened a few years ago, just a few days before Halloween. I had just gotten off work and was looking forward to the long weekend. I planned to stay up late and have a chill night. On the way home, I grabbed some fast food and then settled onto the sofa to eat and watch Netflix. About 30 minutes into my show, I paused it to throw away the leftovers. When I walked into the kitchen and tossed the trash, I happened to glance out the back window and saw a man standing in my backyard. This was really weird because my yard is small but completely fenced in, so it wasn't like he just wandered in by accident from a shortcut. I flipped on the porch light and slid open the glass door. "Hey." "What are you doing out here?" I yelled at him. Under the light, I could see his face more clearly. He was a young guy, probably in his early 20s, with these tired, almost frightening eyes. He didn't answer me, so I called out again. "You need to leave right now. This is my backyard." He just glanced at me and then casually walked toward the gate. I watched to make sure he was gone. After he disappeared, I was still confused about what had just happened. It was so bizarre. I even went out into the backyard and stood where he had been, looking up at my house to see if anything had caught his eye, but there was nothing. I went back inside and tried to shake it off. I didn't know what else to do. I poured myself a glass of water, got back on the couch, and continued my show. I finished that episode and had just started the next one. Maybe 20 minutes had passed when I heard footsteps running in my backyard. Before I could even react, a loud thump hit the door, rattling the whole frame. I jumped up and ran to the kitchen. My legs froze when I saw the sight in front of me. It was the same man from earlier. He was now pressed against my back door. He was pushing his whole body into the glass door, his shoulders and chest tight against the surface. His hands were gripping the handle, yanking on it like he was trying to pull it off. I stood there, stunned, seeing his face just inches away on the other side of the thin glass. His eyes weren't tired anymore. They were wide, staring right at me with a wild and aggressive look. His mouth was open, and he was trying to speak, but only guttural, garbled sounds came out. I quickly grabbed the inside handle with both hands. He kept yanking, and with each tug, the whole door shook. I could hear the metal groaning and the screws loosening bit by bit. "Open the door!" he screamed. "I'm running out of patience!" My hands were shaking. I couldn't tear my eyes away from his contorted face. I took a step back, trying to keep my balance. "Get out of my house! Leave right now!" I yelled back. He didn't respond with words, but with a massive shoulder check to the door. The whole frame shuddered. I flinched and stumbled backward, almost tripping. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone to call 911, my eyes still glued to the crazed man. Cold sweat ran down my back. I held the phone, listening to it ring, while in front of me, he kept trying to break in. He pushed, pulled, and slammed against the door with increasing force. Then, he suddenly stopped. In the silence, I could hear my own ragged breathing. He stood still pressed against the glass, staring at me. His eyes still held that insane look. "You can't hide forever," he said in a chilling voice. Then he smiled, which sent a shiver down my spine. After that, he turned and went back towards the gate, but this time he didn't leave. I heard footsteps moving around the side of the house. Not being able to see him was even more terrifying than when he was right in front of me. I paced between windows, trying to keep track of where he was. I just kept praying he wouldn't try anything else. Every little noise made me jump. About 5 minutes passed in this tense state. Then, a police car showed up. I saw the flashing red and blue lights through my living room window. Immediately, I heard footsteps running from the side of the house, but they weren't running away. They were running toward the back door. He reappeared at the door and started trying to break it down again. This time, he was even more violent, repeatedly headbutting the glass and using his shoulder to ram it. I could hear him growling. The crazy thing was that he chose to try to break in again instead of trying to escape. The police quickly caught him in the act. After a short struggle, they cuffed him, put him in the car, and left. 2 officers stayed behind to get my statement and check on the house. Luckily, he didn't break anything. The next morning, I got a call from the police with the results of his interrogation. The man, whose name was Melvin, was apparently heavily under the influence of some kind of stimulant during the incident. This was later confirmed by tests. Even after being questioned all night and a few more times when he was sober, Melvin never gave a real reason for his actions. The only good thing for me was that he wasn't armed with any weapons. From what I know, he was only jailed for a few weeks because he was not in his right mind during the crime, and that always leaves me worried that he might come back. I'm Chasey. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and my little sister Lauren is 8. This is the unforgettable story of me and my sister's crazy and scary Christmas Eve last year. My family wasn't like those TV families with a Christmas tree loaded with presents or a cozy dinner by the fire. My dad worked hard, but we were still struggling with money. My mom, who was really my stepmom, drank a lot and barely cared about us. That Christmas Eve, my dad drove 3 hours to work. My stepmom got drunk and passed out in the afternoon, leaving us to take care of ourselves. I still wanted to make a good memory for Lauren. I'd saved up some money from my part-time job to buy Lauren a little gift, a dog keychain she really liked. When I gave her the gift, Lauren's eyes lit up, and her big smile made me feel like all the effort was totally worth it. Lauren surprised me even more. She gave me a handmade card with a thank you note and cute little drawings. A weird, warm feeling spread through my heart. We sat next to each other, all curled up in a big blanket, eating popcorn and watching Christmas shows on the old TV. Everything felt calm and happy. But then, there was a sudden knock at the door. Lauren jumped up and yelled, "It's gotta be Dad!" and ran toward the door without thinking, but I quickly pulled her back. Before he left, Dad had told me real seriously, "Don't open the door to anyone, especially on Christmas Eve. That's when bad guys can take advantage of things." Lauren still wouldn't listen and kept trying to run to the door. She looked through the peephole and shouted, "It's Santa Claus!" "Chasey, open the door!" But I felt a sense of unease rising in my heart. I looked through the peephole and saw a guy in a red suit and a Santa hat. But the look in his eyes was nothing like I'd imagine a nice Santa would have. His cold stare at the door made my skin crawl. I pulled Lauren away from the door, trying to sound firm. "You can't open the door. That's not Dad, and it's definitely not Santa." The guy outside started using a sweet voice, saying he just wanted to give us presents. But I wasn't fooled. I yelled through the door, telling him to leave. Instead of giving up, he got even more patient. The knocking got louder, more regular, and kept going. He pulled some stuff out of his pocket and started messing with the lock. My heart was pounding, and Lauren was shaking as she clung to me. I pulled Lauren over to the landline to call my dad, but the phone was dead, and my sisters and I just got more and more freaked out. At this point, I decided to call 911, but the operator didn't believe me and thought we were just messing around. I felt totally helpless and hopeless. Meanwhile, Lauren ran upstairs to wake up her stepmom, but nothing could get her to wake up. Lauren ran back down, hugged me, and then just broke down in tears. Outside, the sound of the door being broken down kept getting louder, and the creepy guy's laugh sounded like he was enjoying watching my sisters and me freak out. I had to come up with a way to fix this situation. I looked around the living room and stopped when I saw the smoke alarm on the ceiling. An idea popped into my head. I decided to create an emergency so the fire department would come and help us. I grabbed a roll of tissue, lit a small candle, and held it up to the smoke alarm. The fire alarm went off loud, and about 10 minutes later, I heard the fire truck siren. We sighed in relief when we saw the headlights shining through the window. But what was even crazier was the guy outside the door suddenly yelling really loud. He said he was our dad, pretending to be Santa Claus, but got stuck outside. His voice came through urgently, asking the firefighters to break down the door. The fear that hadn't completely gone away hit me even harder. My hands were freezing, but the worry about my sister's safety and mine made me feel stronger than ever. I knew that right then, I had to act fast. I remembered the family photo hanging on the wall in the living room. I quickly grabbed the photo, ran out, and cracked the door open, holding it up with shaky hands. I told the firefighters everything that happened. The guy outside wasn't my dad. He was a scammer who'd tricked us and was trying to break down the door. When the firefighters gave him suspicious looks, the creep immediately turned to run but got held back. The police were called right away, and the guy was quickly restrained. Once the situation was settled, the firefighters called my dad's work to let him know about the emergency. My dad came straight home that night. When he found out what happened, he was really mad. He and my stepmom got into a huge argument and then decided to get a divorce. My dad said that me and my sisters were the most important things in the world. My dad also switched jobs so he could spend more time taking care of us. That Christmas Eve was super scary, but it also made me realize how much power and responsibility I have as the oldest sister. And most importantly, it brought a change to my family, a new start to a better life, one without fear or lack of love. I clearly remember it was a rainy night in June. The sound of rain tapping steadily on the roof created a rhythmic sound. The kind of weather that makes you just want to curl up in a warm blanket and text the person you like. That's exactly what I was doing, surrounded by pillows, immersed in darkness, lit only by the faint blue glow from my phone's screen. Her name was Jenny, and I was Victor, a 15-year-old high school student. Jenny was beautiful with long blonde hair and a smile that could light up a dark room. She was in my science class at Westlake High School. It took me 2 months to muster the courage to ask for her Snapchat, and we started texting every night, which became a routine. I had waited for an hour when Jenny texted me saying she was alone because her parents had taken her younger brother to the doctor for an emergency fever. A Snapchat notification popped up. I quickly unlocked my phone. It was a selfie from Jenny. She was smiling, wearing a purple hoodie, with her hair falling down to her shoulders. Her bedroom was dark, lit only by a small nightlight on the bedside table. A message came with the photo. "I'm pretty tired, but I don't want to sleep yet. Tell me something fun." I smiled and started typing my reply. But then I stopped. Something felt off. I looked at the photo again carefully, and I noticed the window in her bedroom in the background, reflecting the dim light from the nightlight. And when I zoomed in on the picture, my heart almost stopped. There was a face in the window. At first, I thought it was just an illusion caused by the light and shadows. So I sat up, turned the screen brightness all the way up, and looked again. My heart suddenly raced as I realized that it was definitely the face of a man. Although the image was blurry, I could still see his eyes staring directly at Jenny. My hands began to shake. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. "Jenny, someone is outside your window," I typed as quickly as I could. I waited for a few seconds. No response. I typed again, this time with more exclamation marks, as though that would make my message arrive faster. "Jenny, someone is watching you through the window. Call your parents now." 3 minutes passed, no response. Should I call the police? But what would I say? We had just met at school. I knew she lived in Oak Ridge, but I didn't know her exact address. My phone buzzed. Jenny was calling me on video. My hands shook so much I could barely swipe to answer. When I did, I saw Jenny's face appear on the screen, pale and tear-streaked. "Victor, there's someone trying to get into my room," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Call your parents." "I've called them. They're on their way." Then I heard it, the scratching sound on the glass. Not from the window in my room, but from Jenny's side. I could see the terror on her face. It's trying to open the window," Jenny whispered, her voice so quiet I could barely hear. I didn't know what to do. A sense of helplessness washed over me. I was here, safe in my room, while Jenny, the girl I liked, was facing a real nightmare. "Can you run out of the room or lock the door?" "I can't move." The scratching continued. Then a new sound, the sound of metal. He was trying to open the window from the outside. Jenny turned the camera toward the window, and there was a shadowy figure outside, faint behind the glass. A hand was pushing. The window was slowly opening. "Jenny, run! Run now!" I yelled, tears starting to stream down my face. The camera shook violently. As Jenny got up, I heard the sound of hurried, heavy footsteps as she ran through the room. The sound of the door opening, the heavy breathing. She was running down the hallway. "I'm running downstairs. Victor, if anything happens. No, nothing's going to happen. Your dad's almost home, right? Just hide. Go to the kitchen and find a knife to protect yourself. The camera continued to shake as Jenny ran down the stairs. I caught a brief glimpse of the dark living room, then the kitchen. Victor, I think I hear footsteps on the stairs. Jenny, hide. Hide now. I'm in the kitchen cupboard under the sink. Your dad will be home soon. Just hide and stay quiet. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. I could hear Jenny's breath, tight and labored. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening. Just 10 minutes ago, we were texting like normal, sharing stories about the day at school. Now, I was watching extreme fear unfold before my eyes, and I couldn't do anything to help. Then I heard it through the phone, the slow steps coming into the kitchen. The footsteps stopped. I could hear Jenny's breath becoming more frantic.
Jenny Miller.
A voice spoke up, making both me and Jenny jump.
I know where you are. Why don't we talk?
Jenny put her hand over her mouth to stop her breathing. I could see her tears in the dim light from the phone screen.
I've been watching you for a long time, Jenny. On Snapchat, you never noticed that my account was always there, following every one of your posts. I know you like purple. I know you hate broccoli. I know you sleep with a moon-shaped nightlight.
I felt sick. How long had this person been watching her?
And I know you're talking to that kid, Victor. He's not worth your time, Jenny. He's just a little boy. You need a real man.
My heart stopped when I heard my name. How did he know about me? The footsteps started again, walking around the kitchen.
You can't hide forever, Jenny. I've seen all the videos of your house you posted on Snapchat. I know every corner of this house, and I especially know about the cupboard under the sink where you're hiding. Come out, Jenny, or I'll break this door down. 1, 2.
The front door opened, cutting off the intruders counting. Jenny! I heard the sound of hurried footsteps leaving the kitchen, the door opening and slamming shut. Dad! Jenny screamed, pushing open the cupboard door. The camera shook as she ran toward the front door. Through the blurry screen, I saw Mr. Miller tightly hug Jenny. She was sobbing in his arms. Are you okay? What happened? Dad, there was a man. He climbed into my window. He was chasing me. We should call the police. The police arrived, took Jenny's statement, and checked the house. They found marks on the bedroom window showing that someone had tried to open it from the outside. They also found footprints in the garden beneath Jenny's window, but no traces of the intruder inside the house. It seemed like he had fled when Mr. Miller arrived. Jenny showed the police the Snapchat photo, but it was too blurry, not enough to become a lead in the investigation. 3 months have passed since that night. Jenny transferred schools because her parents didn't feel safe at Westlake anymore. We still kept in touch, but we didn't text every night like before. There was a fear that had changed between us. The police never found the intruder. No security cameras in the area captured his image. The footprints didn't match any criminal records in their database. Sometimes, when I lie in bed at night, looking at the darkness outside my window, I wonder if he's still watching me. And the worst part is, I can't stop thinking about how he knew my name, how he knew Jenny, and I were texting each other. He had been following all of her social media accounts and probably mine too. Since that night, I've made all my social media accounts private. I no longer post selfies, always make sure the curtains are drawn tightly at night, and I always feel like someone is watching me. I'm Naomi, 15 years old. That evening was a Saturday night. My parents were out at a friend's birthday party and wouldn't be back until late. I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching a comedy. Abby, our 7-year-old dog, was curled up beside my feet. Everything was peaceful until 9 o'clock. I heard a noise from outside. Abby heard it too and lifted her head. I muted the TV and listened. It was just the sound of the wind blowing through the branches of the maple tree outside. I was about to turn the sound back on when Abby suddenly jumped up. Her ears stood up and she stared toward the front door. I turned off the TV completely and everything went silent. The sound of slow footsteps came clearly through the stillness. Someone was walking from the driveway, across the front yard, then toward the side of the house. I stood up, my legs shaking. Looking through the living room window, I saw the front yard lit up by the lights. There was no one out there, but the footsteps continued, now coming from the back of the house. Abby walked toward the front door, her fur standing on end. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Maybe it's just a neighbor walking their dog. But why would he walk into my yard? The footsteps stopped somewhere behind the house. I waited, counting my heartbeat. A moment later, I heard the sound of metal clinking. Abby started growling. It definitely wasn't the neighbor, like I had thought. Abby never reacts like this to familiar people. I quietly moved to the kitchen, where there was a small window above the sink facing the backyard. Everything was dark. The sound of metal came again. This time it was clearer. Someone was messing with the back door lock. I moved closer to the wall and slowly peered through the corner of the window. The motion sensor light in the backyard suddenly turned on, bright as day. I saw the back of a tall man in a black coat, wearing a knitted hat covering his face. He was holding a long metal bar, trying to pry open the back door lock. I froze, stunned. He was a burglar, or worse. I backed away, leaning against the refrigerator. My hands were trembling. I needed to call 911 right away, but I couldn't find my phone. I put my hands on my head, trying to remember where I had left it. The sound of metal scraping against the lock continued. He seemed to be getting impatient. Abby ran into the kitchen, looking up at me, still growling toward the back door. I hugged Abby's neck, whispering, "Shh, Abby, don't make a sound." But Abby wouldn't listen, her growling getting louder. The scraping noise immediately stopped. I held my breath. He knew someone was inside. A few seconds passed, and I heard heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs at the back of the house. He was walking down to the backyard, leaving the back door, but I knew he wasn't leaving. The footsteps moved from the backyard to the side of the house. He was walking around checking other entrances. I heard him try pushing against the window frame. It was locked, but he was still trying. Then he moved to the living room window. Abby barked sharply. I rushed to cover her mouth, but it was too late. The footsteps stopped at the living room window. I imagined he was standing out there, staring through the glass, knowing for sure someone was home. My heart pounded harder and harder. I had to do something. Then suddenly, I remembered my dad's gun. He keeps it in the closet in their bedroom. The footsteps started again. Now he was in front of the house. I didn't have much time to hesitate. I picked up Abby and ran down the hall to my parents' bedroom and opened the closet. I felt a little safer. My dad's old shoebox was at the bottom of the closet. I opened it. Inside was a small handgun next to a box of bullets. I picked it up and checked the magazine like I had seen my dad do. 6 rounds, all there. I took the safety off, my hands still shaking. Abby was standing by the door, looking toward the stairs with her ears perked up. The scraping from the basement started again. The basement door was old, and the lock wasn't very secure. If he kept at it, he could open it. Abby ran toward the basement stairs, barking loudly. Her barking echoed through the house like an alarm system. The scraping from the basement grew louder. I looked at the gun in my hand. If he came in, if he meant to hurt me, would I be able to pull the trigger? The scraping stopped. Abby stopped barking but was still growling. I listened. There were no footsteps from the basement. He hadn't entered the house. Instead, I heard heavy footsteps moving outside, climbing the concrete steps leading from the basement door to the yard. He had given up. I collapsed onto the bedroom floor, leaning against the bed. Abby ran up to me, licking my face. I held her tightly, feeling her warmth. Now, I needed to call the police. The phone had to be somewhere under the living room couch. I ran downstairs and found it in the corner of the sofa. But before I pressed the call button, I heard a car engine from far away. The headlights shone through the living room window. The car was turning into our driveway. My parents were home. I still didn't dare open the door to run outside. I just stood still, listening. But Abby had noticed, her tail wagging furiously. My parents stepped into the house through the garage door, talking about the party. "Sarah, are you asleep?" my mom called. I ran to them, still holding the gun in my hand. When my parents saw me like that, their smiles immediately disappeared. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" my dad asked, quickly taking the gun from my hand. I told them everything, my voice shaking. My dad turned on the back porch light and grabbed a flashlight to check around the house. We called the police. 2 officers arrived, took my statement, and checked the house. The basement door and the back door showed signs of tampering. It was likely that someone was testing out which house was easy to break into. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with Abby curled up next to me, listening to every sound outside. The next morning, I went down to the kitchen and overheard a conversation between Uncle Peter and my dad on the phone. "Jack, I stopped by your place last night, but no one answered the door." My dad was silent for a while. "Did you do anything there, Peter?" "Well, I just wanted to leave a thank you card and a gift card for Sarah. She helped me with my presentation last week and I just got promoted." "Did you try any of the doors?" "No, I just left the card and left." My dad and I looked at each other in silence. So the first footsteps were from Uncle Pete, and the one who tried to pry open the lock and walk around my house came later. I shuddered as I realized, if Uncle Pete hadn't come first, I might not have been alert in time. It's chilling to think about.
I am Maddie. At 17, most people dream about senior prom or taking road trips with friends. But not me. I spend most of my time sitting in a quiet room, staring at an old photo of me and Taylor. I wonder how a human heart can break into so many pieces and still find the strength to beat. Taylor wasn't just my best friend. She was the other half of my soul. From the first time we met when we were 9 years old, Taylor and I were inseparable. People used to call us twins because we went everywhere and did everything together. When we were 12, Taylor's family had to move to a different town. I cried so much and begged my parents to move our house to follow her family. I couldn't imagine life without Taylor. My parents gave in to my wishes and agreed, so we continued our journey together. Taylor was the kind of person everyone loved the moment they met her. She had blue eyes, soft brown hair, and a smile that always made you feel at ease. But what I truly admired was the way she was always kind to everyone. She was always warm and good-hearted, and I cherished every moment we spent together. Taylor spent a lot of time at my house, sometimes even more than at her own. Taylor often stayed the night, and on some nights, she would hold me and cry. I asked her why, but she just shook her head, not wanting to talk. Once, past midnight, Taylor unexpectedly knocked on my door with terror in her eyes, saying she needed to stay over. I never refused. I just held her and tried to make her feel safe. I knew something bad must have been happening. One day, Taylor showed me an Instagram account. The name was Brad Wright. The profile showed a perfect man, a sharp jawline, stunning blue eyes, broad shoulders, and a very confident vibe. Brad messaged her constantly, always starting conversations and complimenting Taylor. What stood out was Brad's patience, waiting for a response from Taylor even though it had been 3 weeks with no luck. Taylor laughed and said it was just for fun, but I could see she was flustered every time he was mentioned. Brad even said he lived in the same town as us, so I told Taylor to consider meeting him. A perfect guy like that was worth talking to, right? But then, Taylor disappeared. I couldn't believe it. She wasn't the type of person to leave without saying a word. Her mother and her stepfather were frantic, searching everywhere. I joined the townspeople to form a search party, looking from small alleys to the woods on the edge of town. Every time someone called out Taylor's name, a spark of hope lit up in me. I hoped she would appear and explain that everything was just a misunderstanding. A week later, volunteers found Taylor in the woods on the outskirts of town. She was gone. I collapsed when I heard the news. The sense of loss felt like it was suffocating my heart. When the details of the crime scene were revealed, I vomited from disgust and pain. My Taylor, that beautiful, kind girl, had been destroyed in the most haunting way possible. Her nose was shattered, and her face was distorted from a brutal beating. Her clothes. The killer had intentionally humiliated her even after she had passed away. Her upper body was torn because of wild animals, and there was a strong smell of bleach mixed with the scent of decay. The police started their investigation. I provided information about Brad Wright, hoping the perfect guy from Instagram would be caught. I hoped that would be the clue to the truth. But when the truth came out, it was even more sickening than death. The Brad Wright account didn't exist. The pictures were fake. The person behind those sweet messages, the one who patiently waited for Taylor for weeks, the one who lured her into the woods to commit that monstrous act, was Taylor's stepfather. I felt a double betrayal, losing my best friend and realizing the killer was someone we trusted. Taylor's stepfather was actually just her mother's boyfriend, as they had only known each other for a few months. He had a scary appearance, but his sincere gestures and words had made me think differently. Taylor had run to me for safety, but I didn't fully understand what she was trying to hide. That sick and depraved stepfather was sentenced to life in prison, but my Taylor will never come back. Pain and anger fill me, but the only thing I can do is tell her story. I want to make sure no one else has to experience the pain Taylor endured. Taylor will forever be the most beautiful part of my youth, and I will always remember her. Her story will not be forgotten. This story is based on the tragic true crime case of a young woman named Justice Marie Garrett, which took place in April 2018. The perpetrator was Robert Bobby Kern. He claimed to be Justice's stepfather, but he was actually just her mother's boyfriend. Their relationship had not been going on for very long at the time. According to her best friend Rochelle, Justice often avoided going home. Instead, she stayed overnight at Rochelle's house as much as possible. Both Justice and Rochelle were deeply intimidated by Kern. His scary appearance and behavior made them feel uneasy every time they saw him. On the day she went missing, the predator claimed he was driving Justice to school. In reality, this was a trap. He had planned the ride so he could carry out a depraved and violent attack on her. This story highlights a serious and ongoing issue in society regarding the hidden dangers young women face. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the people closest to a family can be the most dangerous and difficult criminals to stop. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories. My name is Robert, and I live in a small town in Georgia. This story happened back in 2012. I was 22 at the time, fresh out of community college and working part-time at a tire shop in Mayfield Hollow. I had two best friends, Kyle Morgan and Sean Turner. Kyle was the kind of guy who commanded the room the second he walked in. He was reckless, impulsive, always had some get-rich-quick scheme, and possessed an irresistible charm. Sean, on the other hand, was the calmest person I ever knew. He was the anchor that kept our friendship from drifting away into Kyle's crazy ideas. That February, we decided to spend a weekend fishing on the Apalachicola River. Kyle excitedly bragged that he had borrowed an aluminum fishing boat, But when he showed up with it, the thing was shockingly old and beat up. Kyle was at the helm, constantly cracking jokes about creepy creatures lurking in the dark water and the bodies of drowned people that were never found. Sean's face went pale listening to those stories, but Kyle didn't care. He just kept driving the boat in circles around the brush, looking for the perfect fishing spot. 3 hours passed without a single bite. Kyle started getting cranky. He began driving aggressively, revving the engine and making sharp turns to churn up the water. And then, the nightmare happened. The boat tilted hard. Sean lost his balance and tumbled into the river. At first, I thought it was just a typical fall, but then Sean started screaming that he didn't know how to swim. I quickly turned to Kyle, waiting for him to react. In that split second, Kyle's face froze. It was an expression of total emptiness, a coldness that sent shivers down my spine. Then he acted. He revved the engine and turned the boat back toward Sean, but he went too fast. The side of the boat slammed into Sean's head with a sickening crack, and he sank instantly. We both jumped into the water immediately, diving into the murky depths to find him, but it was hopeless. The river was like a black curtain. We couldn't see a thing. It took 3 days for the dive team to find Sean's body. He had drifted miles downstream. Kyle told the police it was a tragic accident caused by a lapse in judgment while driving the boat. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. During that time, I tried to convince myself that Kyle was just a careless guy, that the coldness I saw on his face was just a figment of my panicked imagination. But when Kyle got out of prison, things took a much darker turn. He contacted me, his voice still full of that high energy. He said he wanted things to go back to the way they were because I was his only friend left. We met up. At first, everything seemed normal. But then Kyle started asking me to go to strange places, remote trails deep in the woods or abandoned hunting cabins miles from anyone. Every time we were out there, he would say things that made my blood run cold. Kyle talked about how easy it would be to make someone disappear in a place like that. If someone screamed in these woods, not a single soul would hear them, he'd say. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was just a twisted joke. But Kyle's eyes were cold and calculating, like he was measuring my reaction. Another time, he described in graphic detail an idea he had: digging a deep pit in the mountains, filling it with piranhas, and throwing a living person in just to see what happened. He said he had researched them and knew they could strip a human to the bone in minutes. His voice sounded genuinely excited. The breaking point was when Kyle proposed a business idea for the deep web. He talked about filming mukbang videos, but instead of normal food, the person would be eating human flesh. He was dead serious, saying people would pay millions of dollars to watch stuff like that. Right then, I knew I had to get away from him. This wasn't the friend I used to know. I blocked his number, moved to a different city, and tried to forget everything. Years passed and I built a new life for myself, but the past wouldn't let go. One day, I got a call from an unknown number in Orlando. It was Kyle. His voice was weak and raspy. He told me he had terminal cancer. The doctors say I only have a few weeks. I want to see you one last time. I agreed. When I walked into that hospital room, I barely recognized him. He was skin and bones, with wires and tubes snaking out of his arms, connecting him to the machines keeping him alive. When he saw me, he smiled. I felt a lump in my throat. He whispered about the good old days we used to have. Then he confessed to killing Sean. He explained that he had lost a huge fish because Sean was fumbling with the anchor, and it made him fly into a silent rage. At first, he just wanted to scare Sean, but when Sean fell into the water, Kyle saw an opportunity. He knew exactly what he was doing when he steered the boat into our drowning friend. I sat there in shock, unable to do anything but listen to the horrific truth. Then Kyle chuckled. Sean wasn't the only one. There were 5 in total. It turned out all those weird stories he told me were true. They weren't ideas. They were things he had actually done. I left the hospital in a daze. During the entire meeting, I hadn't been able to utter a single word. Kyle died a week later. I didn't go to the funeral, and I didn't send flowers. Many years have gone by, but every night I still wonder, how much of a dying man's confession is the truth? Was Kyle Morgan a real serial killer, or just a psychopath who wanted to plant one last seed of terror in the heart of the only friend he had left? I don't know, and honestly, I don't think I want to.
My name is Adam, 30 years old, living in a quiet small town in Ohio. I worked as an amateur private investigator, mostly taking on small jobs from online forums. I needed the money, and that was the only reason I agreed to a job from a man named Dale last October. He wanted me to find his younger sister Annie, who had gone missing 12 years earlier. I met Dale at a roadside cafe. The moment I saw him, he gave off an uncomfortable, physically unclean impression. He had thick, messy black hair that looked like it hadn't been washed in days, a wrinkled old sweatshirt with a brown stain on the chest, and a heavy body odor so strong that I had to take shallow breaths just to stay focused. Dale told me he was a final year medical student and was taking care of sick family members. But the trembling in his voice, the dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep, and the foul smell on his breath made me doubt every word. I saw someone who was desperate, obsessed, and completely lost. He handed me an old, blurry photograph of a little girl, about 2 or 3 years old. She was staring straight into the camera with big, innocent eyes, and he said that was Annie. Everything felt suspicious, a huge disconnect between the story he was telling and the man standing in front of me. But I looked at the thick envelope he gave me, a deposit worth 2 months' rent, and told myself, this is just another hopeless missing person case. It would lead nowhere, but I'd still get paid. I took the deposit and began the job. 10 days later, my skepticism turned into horror. I moved to the neighborhood where Dale lived, hoping to find more clues about his family's past. There, I met Mr. Walker, a recently moved-in neighbor. He was a polite, middle-aged man who seemed very familiar with the area. While talking, I mentioned Dale. Walker froze, frowned, then slowly told me things that stunned me. Dale's parents died 12 years ago in a car accident. Dale was not a medical student. He was studying welding at a technical school. And most importantly, he's severely traumatized, and I don't recall him ever having a younger sister. Walker told the story calmly and confidently, completely shaking the foundation of everything Dale had told me. I decided to investigate Dale more closely. I checked his technical school. A classmate told me that Dale often brought 3 large dolls to class. He treated them like children, and one of them he called Annie. I was shocked, but arrived at a comforting conclusion. Dale had suffered severe psychological trauma after his parents' death and some kind of personal loss, which led him to develop delusions and create a doll family to cope. I thought, at least he isn't a criminal. I'm just taking money from a broken man. That eased my nerves somewhat. During a progress call with Dale, I casually dropped some small talk to justify my lack of progress. Looks like someone new just moved into your area, I said. I saw some moving trucks not long ago. Probably a young family with a little girl or something. It was a harmless throwaway comment. But for someone like Dale, that sentence lit a dangerous spark. I didn't know I had just unknowingly handed him a target right next door. That night, around 11 p.m., I heard a loud scream coming from Walker's house. I ran outside and saw police pinning Dale to the ground. He had been caught trying to pull Walker's daughter, a little girl named Mandy, into his old car. Dale, being restrained by 2 officers, was still screaming in desperation, calling the girl Annie. In that moment, A chill ran down my spine. I realized my careless remark had triggered Dale's kidnapping attempt. After Dale was arrested, I knew I had to do something to redeem myself. I sought out Shirley, the neighborhood association president, who held all the secrets of this small town. Ms. Shirley confirmed that Dale's family did have a 2 to 3-year-old girl who was kidnapped 12 years ago, and Dale's parents died from the shock. So, Dale really did have a sister. But then, she said something that hit me like a lightning strike. The Walkers moved away right after the kidnapping, and only recently returned. Their real daughter died shortly before Annie went missing. They left to cope with the grief. The girl they're raising now, Mandy, she's not their biological child. My entire world spun. Walker's calm insistence that Dale had no sister was a lie. He had lied to me. What else had he lied about? I rushed home, retrieving Dale's old photo of Annie. I zoomed in on it on my computer, staring at the girl's face. I noticed she had 3 tiny moles, arranged in a triangle on her neck. My heart pounded. I drove straight to Mandy's school. I stood at the gate, waiting. When little Mandy walked out, I watched closely. Exactly those 3 moles, arranged in a triangle. I stood frozen in shock. So Mandy was Annie. The Walker family were the kidnappers. I started piecing everything together. The Walkers' real daughter died 12 years ago. The Walkers kidnapped Annie, renamed her Mandy, and raised her as their own daughter to fill the void of their loss. I found the final answer in the secluded outskirts where the old town cemetery lay. In a hidden corner, I found a small, well-cared-for grave with an old stone angel statue. The grave belonged to Mandy Walker, died 12 years ago. That was undeniable proof of their motive. Why did Walker return? Most likely, after 12 years they thought things had settled down, and they returned so Annie, now Mandy, could live near the fake grave they created. I immediately handed over all the information and evidence to the police. Dale, a damaged young man labeled by the community as a delusional doll fanatic, was arrested for kidnapping. But in reality, he was trying to rescue his true little sister. The kidnapping case from 12 years ago and the Walkers' horrifying cover-up were exposed, all because a brother never gave up on his sister. I once thought a mother's greatest pain was losing a child. But for me, that pain was the beginning of the most terrifying and haunting period of my life. I'm Beth. I live in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, with my husband Mike and our 17-year-old son, Kevin. Our lives were peaceful until that July night. Around 2 a.m., a terrifying explosion shook the entire house. The pungent smell of smoke filled the bedroom from under the door. I quickly pushed Mike awake. "The house is on fire," I screamed. Mike leapt out of bed, opening the bedroom door. Flames were already high, the wooden staircase ablaze. Thick black smoke billowed, making it hard to breathe. We crawled on the floor, trying to escape through the window. "Kevin! Where's Kevin?" my husband shouted. Kevin's bedroom was at the end of the hallway. I saw Mike rush towards it despite the spreading flames. I wanted to follow, but the smoke was too thick. I couldn't breathe anymore. I had to climb out the window, falling into the bushes below. I stood on the lawn in front of the house, watching the flames devour our home. The wail of fire trucks echoed in the distance. Mike was brought out by rescuers from the second-story window, his hands and face covered in burn marks. But he was alone. Our son was nowhere to be seen. "Kevin! Where's Kevin?" I screamed. Mike shook his head, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead. I couldn't find him. The world seemed to collapse around me. I couldn't accept the reality at that moment. Kevin was still in there, in that fire, waiting for me to save him. I had to go in there. I had to find my son. "Kevin!" I screamed and lunged towards the burning house. Mike and a firefighter had to hold me back. "Let me go. My son is in there." I struggled and wailed his name. Mike and I embraced, crying loudly. A few hours later, when daylight broke and the fire had completely subsided, only a pile of charred ashes remained. The rescue team searched through the ashes, but found no sign of Kevin's body. I huddled in the back seat of the ambulance, my mind in a strange, blank state. We searched very thoroughly, but the fire was too large, coupled with the high temperature, especially in Kevin's bedroom area. At such temperatures, even bones can be incinerated into ash. The words from a rescue worker made me completely break down. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Coleman. We believe Kevin perished in the fire. Mrs. Coleman, I know this is very hard to accept." No, no. My son is not dead. You have to keep looking," I screamed. Mike hugged me, but this pain was inconsolable. The first few weeks were terrible. Mike was hospitalized for his burns. I stayed with my sister, but every day I drove back to the house. I couldn't accept that Kevin was dead. I dug through the ashes, searching for any remnant of my son. I lost 10 pounds in just 3 weeks and had to constantly take sleeping pills and tranquilizers. After a month, when I could finally accept the truth, we started clearing the debris to rebuild the house. I continued searching. In the rubble of Kevin's room, I found his half-burnt desk. The bottom drawer was still partially intact. Inside, I found a notebook that had been slightly burned, but the remaining pages were still legible. My heart pounded as I realized it was Kevin's diary. I clutched the notebook to my chest, the pain making me burst into tears. After a moment, I took a deep breath and opened the diary. February 15th. Today I attended my first meeting. I understand that only we truly grasp the truth and can cleanse the world. I reread that sentence 3 times. My hands trembled as I turned to another page. February 28th. Jake taught me how to make a bomb. He said we had to act soon. The church is the first target. We will cleanse the world of hypocrites. I couldn't breathe. That's where we used to take Kevin for Mass every Sunday. He used to sing in the choir. I continued reading. March 10th. The bomb is ready. I hid it in my bedroom. Tomorrow we will place it at the church. I threw the notebook to the ground and crawled away. I understood what had happened. Could it be? The bomb Kevin made had unexpectedly exploded in his bedroom. He died instantly, and his body was... The explosion caused the fire that consumed the entire house. I wailed from the deepest part of my pain. My son was a terrorist, a member of some extremist cult. I had failed as a mother. I didn't know what my own child was thinking. "What did you find, Beth?" Mike's question startled me. I quickly hid the diary in my bag. Just a few of Kevin's belongings left. I'm picking them up." That night, I burned the diary. I couldn't tell Mike everything. He had suffered enough. We still had to continue our lives in this small town. I would bury and end everything here. Watching the pages burn to ash, carrying Kevin's horrific secret. But I knew this wasn't the end. I had a responsibility to do something to atone for my son. I started volunteering at a youth counseling center. I wanted to help lost children who could easily be drawn into cults like Kevin. Every night I still dream of Kevin, then wake up haunted by how I failed as a mother. Perhaps that's the punishment I have to endure, not just to lose my child, but to live with the truth that my child could have become a murderer. And perhaps that's also the only way for me to find meaning in life again. I will try my best so that no other child will go down the path Kevin took. Some sounds just bring back the past, no matter how hard you try to forget. The sound I fear and am most haunted by is the chirping of cicadas. It reminds me of a horrifying summer 13 years ago. I was 12 then, living with my parents in a small town in the San Joaquin Valley, California. Summer days there were hot and quiet, with only the incessant chirping of cicadas echoing from the old eucalyptus trees. Next to our house lived Mrs. Morris. She was around 60, with thinning gray hair. She lived alone in a small house at the end of the street. At first, I didn't pay much attention to Mrs. Morris. She was just a quiet old neighbor I occasionally saw watering her garden in the early morning. But gradually I started noticing strange things. One night, I woke up thirsty. Through my bedroom window, I accidentally saw Mrs. Morris standing in the middle of her yard in the shadow of the moonlight. She was whispering something. No one else was around. A few other nights, the scene repeated. Mrs. Morris wandered in her yard with empty eyes, muttering sentences I couldn't clearly hear. Sometimes she would stop, her head tilted to one side, as if listening for someone to reply. Then she would nod and continue whispering. I was scared but didn't tell my parents, choosing instead to close my window tightly and draw the curtains forever. As time passed, I gradually forgot about her strange behavior. Mrs. Morris never seemed to do anything harmful anyway. Aside from the strange neighbor, life in my family's neighborhood was very peaceful. Our house was near a paved road that gently sloped downhill. Every afternoon, I would take my rollerblades to that slope to skate. It was my favorite part of the day. At the bottom of the slope, there was a large moss-green truck parked on the side of the road. The truck was old, its paint peeling in many places, and its bed covered with a dark blue tarp. I usually rollerbladed down to it and then back up, repeating until I was tired. That fateful afternoon, I decided to try rollerblading down the slope as fast as I could. My mom had warned me many times about going too fast, but I never listened. The asphalt was scorching hot under my rollerblade wheels. The warm wind blew through my hair as I sped down the hill. I felt free and exhilarated, until I saw a small dog run across the road right in front of me. I braked hard, losing my balance. Realizing I was about to fall, I could only squeeze my eyes shut and scream. I slowly opened my eyes, sitting up slowly in a daze. Then I was startled to realize I was underneath the truck. The smell of oil and rubber mixed together made the air incredibly suffocating. I gasped for breath, just needing to crawl out. But as I looked around, I was drawn to some white strands gently fluttering in the breeze. Long, soft strands, clinging to something stuck between the two rear wheels. Out of curiosity, I crawled closer. At first, I only saw a pale, round shape, thinking it was a ball or some toy. But when I looked closer, a pair of eyes staring straight back at me. Below them was a nose, one side completely mangled, a wide-open mouth with the tongue lolling out. My entire body froze, my mouth dry, scared but unable to tear my eyes away from that face. Then I realized, Mrs. Morris. Just then, as if hearing her name, Mrs. Morris's head tilted to one side. The creaking sound from her neck bones sent a shiver down my spine. Her body was wedged between the axle and the road, her floral dress torn, her limbs bent at unnatural angles. Blood had dried to a dark brown on the pavement. I screamed and crawled out from under the truck as fast as I could. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably when I got home, my heart pounding as if it would explode. "Mom! Dad!" I yelled as I burst into the house. Mrs. Morris ... My mom looked worried, seeing my panicked state. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "Under the truck. Mrs. Morris is under the truck," I cried, trying to explain. My dad ran outside. A few minutes later, he returned with a pale face and immediately called the police. The police arrived, cordoned off the scene, and removed Mrs. Morris's body. They asked for basic information and instructed everyone not to approach the area. A few days later, the investigation results were released in the local newspaper. According to the report, Mrs. Morris had been suffering from severe insomnia and depression for many years. Inside her home, police found many empty pill bottles and disorganized notes. The autopsy results showed an unusually high concentration of sleeping pills in her blood. The police concluded, on the night of the accident, Mrs. Morris was sleepless and wandering around in a dazed state. A neighbor's camera recorded Mrs. Morris wandering the night the accident happened. Police analyzed the camera footage and concluded that Mrs. Morris was very likely in a dazed state and lay down under Mr. James's car without realizing it. As for Mr. James, he testified that on the night of the accident, he received a complaint from a resident on the street about his car blocking part of a pathway. He went back to his car to move it forward a bit. While driving, he felt a slight bump, but he dismissed it, thinking it was just a rock or a branch. He was not prosecuted, as this was deemed a tragic accident with no signs of negligence. I never rollerbladed on that slope again. My family moved when I was 17. Mrs. Morris's house is still there, abandoned with boarded-up windows. And on hot summer nights, when I hear the cicadas chirping, I still remember the pungent smell of engine oil from under the truck. Most horrifyingly, every narrow gap makes me see Mrs. Morris's distorted face and long gray hair. Looking back now, I understand that those times I saw Mrs. Morris wandering at night and whispering to herself were signs of the psychological illness she was enduring. Perhaps she struggled with insomnia and loneliness for years, until it led to that tragic end. I used to believe the small town where I was born was the safest place on earth. But then, one autumn night last year, a terrifying secret was uncovered that shook the entire town. What haunts me the most is who was behind it. I work as an accountant for a small oil and gas company in Marfa, Texas. It's a small town near the Mexican border. Everyone knows everyone. One of my mechanic friends is Roy. His garage is right in the center of town. I always thought Roy was a kind and gentle man. Not just me, but the whole town loved Roy. Until last autumn, when an incident changed the way I saw everyone around me. I had just finished my shift and was on my way home. I stopped to get gas. Across the street, I saw a chaotic scene. The area was cordoned off. There were many police cars and sirens wailed loudly. Then, I saw a woman wrapped in a blanket. A police officer was leading her away. The woman looked like she had just returned from hell. Her pants were torn, her hair was disheveled, and her face was gaunt. I froze, realizing that the place she had just come from was Roy's auto shop. In the very next second, seeing Roy handcuffed in the back of a police car, head bowed, shocked me. That evening, the whole town was buzzing about what happened with Roy, and I was no exception. The town's resident chat group exploded. Messages kept popping up. Everyone was talking excitedly. From the snippets of information in the messages, I learned that the woman's name was Hannah, a cashier at the local supermarket. She had only moved to town a short while ago and had been missing for 2 weeks. Everyone thought she had gone to visit family in Dallas. But what had really happened, we didn't know. It was all just speculation. 2 days later, the local newspaper published an article with a headline that sent shivers down my spine. Local mechanic accused of abduction and torture. It was just as everyone had suspected. The girl was Hannah. She had been held captive by Roy in a secret room behind his garage for 2 weeks. Hannah recounted that Roy had lured her into the garage, claiming her car had an urgent problem that needed to be checked. What Hannah described stunned me. The room where Hannah was held was completely soundproofed, with surveillance cameras in every corner. On a shelf were videotapes labeled with different dates and the names of dozens of women. Among them was Jessica, a young and beautiful girl who was well known in town. Jessica had disappeared 3 years ago. Everyone thought Jessica had left town to pursue her acting dream in Austin. But now we knew the truth. The police also found a notebook belonging to Roy that detailed everyone's habits. He knew their exact work hours when they came home, when they went shopping. Roy even recorded private conversations he had overheard. But that was only half of the horror, because those were the victims Roy had successfully executed his plan on. In the days after Roy's arrest, many other women came forward, stating they had been followed or approached by Roy. But as a beloved and trusted figure in the community, it was hard for people to unmask him. I started to recall the signs I had overlooked. Roy always asked too many questions about everyone's private lives. He could recount detailed schedules for anyone in town. At the time, I thought Roy was just a neighbor who cared, but now I understand it was a sign of systematic stalking. I suddenly remembered a detail from about a month ago. I was coming home late after a date with Sam and saw the silhouette of a man standing near her house. When I looked closer, the person had vanished. Now I'm sure it was Roy. It's terrifying that Roy had lived among us for years, receiving absolute respect and trust. The trial took place 6 months later, with many town residents and Roy's would-be victims present. He sat silently throughout the proceedings, showing no emotion. When his lawyer asked why he did those things, Roy simply said, "I wanted to understand them." He offered no complex defenses or explanations. Roy's statement silenced the entire courtroom. He didn't see women as human beings, but merely as subjects to study and control. Hannah left town right after the trial. Roy was sentenced to 25 years. His garage was demolished a month later. Now, it's just a gravel lot with weeds growing on it. The town of Marfa is not the same anymore. People have become more vigilant. Casual conversations on the streets have become less frequent. Sometimes the most dangerous person isn't a stranger in the dark, but the neighbor with a friendly smile. I learned that intuition never lies. If something makes you feel uncomfortable about a person, no matter how small, listen to it. Because sometimes the smallest details are signs of something far more dangerous. My name is Alex. I grew up in the quiet town of Ardmore, Pennsylvania. There wasn't much to do there, so finding something fun was always a challenge. When I was in high school, my 3 friends and I often snuck into old abandoned buildings to explore. It was something we loved to do. It wasn't until many years later that I realized that urban exploration is actually a pretty common thing. There was an abandoned church in town that we had visited a few times before. It was creepy, but it was our go-to spot whenever we were looking for a thrill late at night. One chilly fall evening, the air was cool and crisp. We decided to visit the church and have a few drinks inside. The church was behind an 8-foot-high chain-link fence, so we had to climb over it. All of the doors were boarded up, so we always had to enter through a side window. When we got inside, the first thing we noticed was that the floor was strange. The first floor was just dirt, like someone had removed all of the floorboards a long time ago. It left a deep hole in the middle with concrete steps leading down to the basement. We always hung out in that basement. The basement had 3 rooms, but only one had a door. The other 2 were just door frames. The first room we entered was the biggest. There wasn't much in it besides a few old pieces of furniture, broken chairs, and a tattered couch. I remember having to remind my friend Max to be quiet at least a dozen times because he was drunk and getting loud. Still, being in a group was an advantage, and I felt safer knowing there were a few of us together. We drank and laughed as usual. We may have even had music playing, but I don't remember clearly. Then suddenly a door slammed shut. The sound was so loud it startled me. We froze, looking at each other nervously. At first, I thought maybe one of us had accidentally closed the door, or that it was just the wind, but nobody was close to it. Immediately, my friends Luna and Allie panicked and took off. They flew up the stairs, leaving me and Max behind. I didn't want to leave right away. My heart was pounding, I admit, but I didn't want to let the sound scare me. Max looked at my friends leaving, then looked at me, and gave me a silly smile. I knew he was just drunk, not brave. After a few minutes of standing in silence, we decided to investigate. I tiptoed to the door that had just slammed shut and opened it. Behind it was a small room. Max walked past me and went into the room with a carefree look on his face, as if nothing was strange. He touched a dusty wooden table and shook his head, then even sat down in a chair next to it, relaxing as if he were in a familiar place. I walked in and looked around. Besides the table and chairs, there was a wooden shelf. On it was a mirror with some red stains on the surface. At first, I thought it was old paint or something similar, but when I got closer, I noticed something horrifying. They weren't completely dry. The stains were still sticky. I felt the hair on my arms stand up and started to regret not leaving sooner. Clearly, someone or something had been in this room recently. Then, I saw an old photo on the shelf. It was a black and white picture of a woman in a wedding dress. I backed away, and just as I turned, I heard another sound. This time it wasn't a door. It was coming from one of the other rooms, the big room in the basement that we had just left. At this point, I decided it was time to leave. I quickly grabbed our stuff and pulled Max out of there as fast as I could. He was just a body moving, but his mind was asleep, and it took a lot of effort to pull him. I took a deep breath and slapped Max hard to get him to wake up. Then I pushed him to go first. Luna and Allie were still outside waiting for us. When I climbed over the fence and put my feet on the sidewalk, none of us said a word. Before we left, I looked back, and I swear I saw a person's silhouette standing in the open window frame. I still pray that, by some small chance, my mind was playing tricks on me, but I'll never know for sure. I never went back to that church again. Many years later, I went back and found that the church had been completely demolished. I still can't find an explanation for what happened that night. I'm glad my friends were there to witness it with me. If I had been alone, I would have doubted the whole thing. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, where everyone knows your name and your family's business. Even now, at 28, the memory of what happened when I was 14 still haunts me. Back then, Halloween was the day I looked forward to most all year. It wasn't just about the candy anymore. It was about the fun of coming up with mischievous ways to mess with Mr. Harlan. Mr. Harlan lived in an old brick house right on the edge of the road, just before the street disappeared into the vast cornfields. He was in his late 70s, always wore high-waisted dress pants, and hated kids, especially me and my older brother Kyle. Every Halloween, teasing him became a favorite job for us. I remember most of the things we did. In 5th grade, we toilet papered his whole front porch. In 6th grade, we put a fake snake in his mailbox. By 8th grade, we were putting severed rubber arms in his yard, setting off stink bombs under his window, and Kyle even rigged a speaker to play random screams from the bushes. Every time he was messed with, Mr. Harlan would rush out with his flashlight and scream threats. But nothing ever happened. He never called our parents or the police, just mumbled something about getting us back. We thought he was just talk. That year, Halloween fell on a Saturday and it was warm, which was perfect for staying out late. Kyle and I had been planning our grand finale of pranks for weeks, but as we walked past Mr. Harlan's house at sunset, we noticed something weird. Paper skeletons taped to the windows, an inflatable pumpkin in the yard, twinkling lights on the porch. It looked cheap, like someone had just bought a Halloween kit and thrown everything up at once. But the notable thing was, Mr. Harlan never decorated. Kyle nudged me and said, "He's trying to outdo us. We can't let him win." We waited until late at night, when most trick-or-treaters were gone and the street was quiet. Kyle brought a bag full of tools, nothing dangerous, just our usual stuff: smoke bombs, a motion-activated sound box, and a plastic doll painted with fake blood. We sneaked through Mr. Harlan's backyard, keeping low behind the row of bushes along his fence. Everything was dark, except for the faint orange glow from the porch. There was no noise, not even the static radio he usually kept on. I whispered, "This feels wrong." Kyle just grinned, tossed me the sound box and said, "That's the point, let's mess it up." We split up like always. Kyle went around to the shed near the back fence, while I stayed closer to the house. I was trying to find a good place to hide the sound box when I noticed something strange. The pumpkin on the porch was slowly deflating, like someone had stabbed it. But no one was around. I figured it had a tear. I crouched low behind a bush, waiting for Kyle's flashlight to flash. That's when I heard the shed door open, followed by a loud clank, like something heavy had slammed shut. Then everything went silent again. I waited for a few minutes. I whispered Kyle's name, but there was no answer. I stood up and crept toward the shed. The padlock on the door was secured shut. I tapped lightly on the door and called Kyle's name. No reply. I knocked harder. Still silence. Then I noticed a small camera mounted high in the corner of the shed, flashing red. Right below it, a piece of cardboard read, "Tricked." It hit me then that this was the prank on us. Harlan had turned the tables. I backed away, looking around the yard, expecting him to leap out of the shadows. But no one was there, just a tense silence. I pulled on the shed lock. It wouldn't budge. I tried to smash it with a rock, but it only made a useless clanking sound. From inside, I thought I heard a faint noise, like Kyle was muffled or trying to move. Panic started to spread through my body. I ran back out to the street. I stood frozen under the streetlight. I had two choices: go get help, which meant waking up my parents or the cops and having to admit we had been harassing Harlan, or go back and save Kyle before dawn. I stood there looking at the dark house, the creepy feeling sinking in as I realized we were in too deep, way past what we had ever imagined. I decided I couldn't leave Kyle. I ran back, heart pounding. I used the screwdriver to pry the hinge bolts from the outside. It took forever, but I finally got it open. Kyle was sitting on the floor, pale, with his knees pulled up to his chest. Inside the shed, dozens of photos were taped all over the walls. Astonishingly, they were all pictures of my brother and me over the years. Us in our costumes, walking past his house, even some taken secretly through our bedroom windows. Harlan hadn't hurt Kyle. He had just locked him in, surrounded by the photos. That was Harlan's message. I've been watching, letting everything build up, and this is your punishment. We didn't say anything. We just ran. Since that night, we never set foot near Harlan's house again. He didn't call the police, nor did he ever mention it again. I never forgot that evening. We ran home like crazy, Kyle gasping for breath, and me shaking and speechless. That night, we lay still in our room, unable to sleep, and for the first time, I saw my brother cry. Kyle whispered, "We went too far, didn't we?" I nodded, the guilt feeling like a rock in my chest. I realized all the mischief we had done wasn't harmless kid stuff anymore. We had been hurting and messing with a lonely old man's life for years, just to satisfy our own thrill. Kyle and I decided to stop and apologize. We wrote a letter, leaving it on Mr. Harlan's doorstep. "We're sorry for everything. We won't do it again." Mr. Harlan didn't reply, but from then on, every Halloween he decorated his house as usual, and we just quietly walked past. Now, at 28, every time I recall it, I still feel scared. The fear isn't from Mr. Harlan, but because of my own carelessness and impulsiveness back then. I understood that seemingly harmless pranks can leave real wounds on others, and Mr. Harlan's silent retaliation was the deepest lesson I ever got. Consequences always come sooner or later, and empathy is always harder than impulse. Now I tell this story so we can understand that some pranks aren't jokes, and sometimes, just by putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, we can save them and ourselves a lot of pain. My great-grandmother used to tell me a strange story about something she experienced when she was young. At the time, she was married with 4 children. Her family lived in the small town of Quartzsite, Arizona. One afternoon, she was cleaning the farm. Her sister, Eliza, went out to get water from the creek. Their 2 families lived together in the sparsely populated and dangerous American West. Suddenly, the family dogs started to bark fiercely outside. Normally, they were very gentle and rarely barked for no reason. She went to the porch to see what was happening. She saw them barking at a large sand dune in front of the house. Then she saw a huge creature. It had 4 legs and red fur. Its back was twisted. It appeared on top of the dune and came down toward her house. On the back of the creature was a man. But he didn't look normal. His face was horrible and gaunt. His mouth was stretched into a wide smile. And he had no eyes. As a very religious person, she immediately thought it was the devil. He was riding a red creature to come and take her and her family. She ran into the house. She blocked the door with a kitchen table. She gathered her 4 children and prayed. While she was praying, she heard a sharp, terrified scream from outside. She realized it was Eliza's voice. Even though she was terrified and worried about her sister, she didn't dare to go outside. She had to protect her children. A few hours later, the husbands came back from herding sheep. She cried as she told them about the devil and Eliza's disappearance. The two men immediately grabbed their guns and oil lamps and went to look for her. They found Eliza near the creek. She was lying face down on the ground. Blood was everywhere. Eliza's body looked like it had been trampled to death. There were many large hoof prints around. My great-grandfather rode his horse into town to tell the sheriff. When the investigator arrived at the scene, he confirmed that Eliza had been trampled to death. The hoof prints left on the ground were too big to be from any horse. My great-grandmother told them the story about seeing the devil and the red-furred creature, but the investigators didn't believe the part about the devil. In the end, Eliza's cause of death was recorded as unknown. From then on, the story of the devil spread throughout the Arizona frontier. People named it the Red Demon. At first, most people didn't believe it was true. They thought it was just a rumor or an exaggeration. However, over time, reports of seeing the Red Demon became more frequent and stranger. She heard many campers say that the red ghost had trampled on their tents. One cowboy claimed to have caught it with his lasso around its neck, but the red ghost ran so hard that it dragged him and forced him to let go. After Eliza's death, she looked out the window one day and saw the Red Demon standing in her turnip garden. My great-grandfather decided he would shoot it dead if he had the chance. After many days of waiting, they saw the red ghost once again. My great-grandfather immediately grabbed his rifle and fired shot after shot at the red ghost until it fell. When they ran out to check, they realized that all the stories about this creature were wrong. The creature was not a monster. It was a camel. It had red fur, a long neck, and a hump on its back. The rider was not the devil. It was the decomposing corpse of a man. The flesh and eyes had rotted off his face. This made him look like he had no eyes and had a wide smile. They didn't know who the man was. They also didn't know how he died. The strange thing was that even though he was dead, his body was still sitting upright on the camel's back. He never fell off. This is what created the scary image of a devil. It wasn't until many years later that people started to understand the truth. The U.S. Army had brought camels to the west from the Mediterranean region to transport goods across the desert. But the U.S. Army was not familiar with how to care for and manage them. The outbreak of the Civil War also caused the project to be abandoned. The camels were either released or sold. Some still existed in the wild in the American Southwest desert. For the people of Arizona at the time, who had never seen these animals outside of books, it was not surprising that they mistook a camel for a monster. My great-grandmother said that from that day on, she no longer believed that all scary things came from hell. Sometimes, it's people and forgetfulness that create the most terrifying ghosts. She lived the rest of her life with regret for not running out when she heard her sister scream. But deep down, she still believed she had done the right thing to protect her children. And every time she retold the story, she would look far away and say softly, "There are some things that look like a devil, but are really just the consequence of a quiet, lonely death in the desert." One August afternoon last year, all it took was a faint knocking sound from an abandoned house to shatter all my beliefs. The perpetrator of the most brutal crime was the person I trusted the most. I'm Elton, the police chief of Sedona, Arizona. For over 15 years of serving here, I've always been proud of this small community. Everyone knows and trusts each other, and the most serious crimes are just land disputes or assaults from drunken fights. That afternoon, I received a call from a family who had just moved into the neighborhood. The woman's voice was filled with anxiety, saying there were strange noises coming from the abandoned house behind their home. The sound was like someone knocking on a wall. I drove my patrol car there. The abandoned house had been there for a long time. The former owner had died many years ago. With no heirs, it was just left to rot. I parked my car and walked into the yard. The weeds were knee-high, and the air was heavy with the smell of mold. I listened, but there was no sound. Maybe the family was mistaken. But as I was about to leave, a faint knocking sound echoed from below. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and some lock-picking tools from the car. I walked inside and felt the wooden floor creak beneath my feet. Searching the first floor, I discovered a secret door under the stairs, locked with a padlock the size of my fist. The strange thing was that the lock was brand new. I used bolt cutters to break the lock. The door opened, revealing a steep wooden staircase leading into the darkness. A strong, foul odor hit me, and I had to cover my nose. "Is anyone here?" My voice echoed down and disappeared into the silence. But then I heard a noise. I slowly walked down. A small room with a low ceiling and no windows gradually appeared. I was shocked to see 3 figures huddled in the corner. A woman and 2 children. All 3 were thin, like skeletons wrapped in skin. The woman looked at me with a look of disbelief. Then she crawled to my feet, grabbed my pants, and sobbed, "Please, please save us." I quickly sat down to comfort the woman. The 2 children, a boy and a girl, just looked at me with scared eyes. I immediately called for an ambulance. While waiting, I shined my flashlight around the room. The walls were covered with etchings. They had carved a line for each day that passed. There were also scrawled messages, pleas for help, and cries for rescue. A bucket in the corner served as a toilet. There were some old, rotting mattresses on the floor, a few cans of food and bottles of water. The medical team arrived and quickly took the woman and the 2 children away. I stayed at the scene with the investigation team. We found a notebook under a mattress. The yellowed pages documented the horror the victims had endured. The first page read, "My name is Leah Porter. Today is the first day I've been held here. If anyone finds this diary..." My mind immediately started racing when I read that line. Leah Porter was a girl who went missing 9 years ago when she was just 16. I had been part of that investigation. The case had been unsolved until today. I continued to read the following pages. She wrote about every day of her captivity, how she was kidnapped on her way home from school. She was locked in here and endured all kinds of physical and mental torture. The 2 children were the kidnappers. She tried to protect them, teaching them to read and write with charcoal on the walls. It was heartbreaking, and I admired Leah's resilience. While examining the scene, a sudden engine noise and a loud screech of tires drew everyone's attention. I looked and immediately recognized the car as belonging to Craig, my best friend. Craig got out of the car, his face as pale as if he had just seen a ghost. I was surprised and asked him what he was doing here, but Craig's eyes were fixed on the ambulance where Leah was being cared for. He stood there like a stone statue for a few seconds. I saw his hands trembling, and he swallowed hard. Then he suddenly turned and ran. I had a bad feeling and ran after him, calling his name. Craig heard me calling and ran faster. I lunged and tackled Craig right in front of his car. "Why are you here, Craig?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with the eyes of a person caught red-handed. When I tackled Craig, a key fell out of his pocket. I handed it to an officer, and the key could open the lock I had just broken. In that moment, my world came crashing down. This abandoned house was only 2 blocks away from Craig's house. The key to the cellar was too new for the age of the house. And most importantly, Craig was the only person I had ever told about Leah Porter's disappearance 9 years ago. He once asked me why the police couldn't find anything. Now I knew the reason. Craig knew because he was the one who hid her. I wanted to punch my best friend, whom I had trusted for 20 years, but I just stood there trembling, watching Craig get handcuffed. I realized how wrong I had been. I had trusted Craig, invited him to my house often, and let him be close to my daughter. I considered Craig my brother, while he was torturing a high school girl and 2 children just a few miles away. In the interrogation room, Craig admitted everything. He confessed to stalking Leah for months before kidnapping her, using the abandoned house as a place of confinement. DNA evidence confirmed he was the father of the 2 children. Leah's diaries, secretly taken photos, and personal belongings found in Craig's house solidified his guilt. With undeniable evidence, Craig was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and rape. Sitting there, reading his statement, I felt suffocated. It took me a long time to sign the arrest warrant for my best friend. I sat in my office for a long time, feeling empty. I still couldn't believe what was happening. Craig is now awaiting trial. Leah and her 2 children are receiving medical and psychological care, slowly learning how to live again. As for me, I'm still the police chief of Sedona, but every night, as I patrol the quiet streets I once believed I knew so well, I wonder how many other secrets are hiding behind closed doors.